Chapter 1189. The monster's body exuded a faint green glow. Although it had no eyes or ears, it was agile enough to dodge the sound wave attacks from 9 serenities and 14 masters. Not only could it resist, but it could also make sharp counterattacks. It was actually able to maintain a balance of attack and defense with 9 serenities and 14 masters. At least it was not being beaten up. The current battle situation was no longer the chasing thing that 9 serenities and 14 masters mentioned just now. Instead, 9 serenities and 14 masters were desperately trying to stop it. Their body movements were swift, trying their best to stop the monster from rushing towards the allied army. The monster's intention was also very obvious. It was desperately rushing towards them, wanting to come into contact with the allied army. Moxie focused his eyes. Although he could not clearly see the facial expression of 9 serenities and 14 masters, who was moving at high speed, he could clearly see that 9 serenities and 14 masters' clothes and vest were already wet. It was clearly sweating profusely. Moxie's pupils shrank suddenly, and he looked at Guhan. Both of them were overwhelmed with shock. Although this monster was at a disadvantage in terms of form and did not seem to be as strong as 9 serenities and 14 masters, and in terms of the battle situation, it was also attacking more and defending more. Yet, it was able to tire 9 serenities and 14 masters to this extent. The strength of this monster was definitely not to be underestimated. 9 serenities and 14 masters' body movement speed became faster and faster. Suddenly, with a bang, she slapped the monster's body fiercely. With a loud bang, the monster staggered back. 9 serenities and 14 masters roared and flew up. Then, a series of explosions sounded like firecrackers. In the blink of an eye, the palms of 9 serenities and 14 masters turned into a shadow and disappeared completely. The dense clapping sound became a long note, but no matter how famous a singer was, they would not be able to sing such a high note. Moxie smacked his lips. He roughly estimated that in that instant, the 9 serenities and 14 masters had launched at least 1,000 palm strikes. Furthermore, every palm strike was executed with full force. Every palm strike landed solidly on the monster's body. The monster was continuously pushed back by the series of attacks, but the 9 serenities and 14 masters did not let up and continued to attack like a shadow. Just this round of attacks had pushed the two of them back a full 30 to 40 li. Bang! The monster's green body suddenly emitted a loud sound, and with a bang, it completely exploded in midair, completely shattered, and turned into a sky full of green splendor. It was as if countless fireflies were dancing in the air. Was it over? Was it over just like that? Moxie frowned. Guhan had been frowning the whole time, looking at the green shadow. His eyes were full of uncertainty, but there was also a strong sense of doubt. The 9 serenities and 14 masters landed on the ground with a bang and actually created a small pit in the ground. With the strength of the 9 serenities and 14 masters, walking on snow without leaving a trace, and walking on duckweed across water were all trivial matters. Even if he stepped on cotton, he might not be able to make the cotton sink in the slightest. However, at this time, he actually created a pit in the ground. It was obvious that this battle had consumed a lot of his strength, and he could no longer completely control his Xian energy. Then, he immediately straightened his body, took a deep breath, and stared at the green shadow in the air with wide eyes. His eyes were actually filled with fear and dread, and it seemed that there was also a strong sense of disbelief. What the hell is going on? Moxie asked softly. The 9 serenities and 14 masters still stared at the green object in the air without turning his head, and said in a low voice, "Be careful. It's not over yet." Moxie was startled. Not over yet? Looking carefully at the green object in the air, he thought to himself that it had already been beaten into a cloud of dust. It was already like this. Was it still not dead? In the air, the strange green mist floated, but it did not rise, nor did it fall. What is this thing? And how did you guys communicate? Moxie was fully alert, and stood next to the 9 serenities and 14 masters. The 9 serenities and 14 masters did not even look at Jundaxiao and continued to stare at the green object in the air. He said in annoyance, "Who knows what this thing is? It's rare for me to have such a peaceful time, so I wanted to come to your war for seizing the heavens to watch the show. The collapse of the Pillar of Heaven's mountains is a big matter, and there might not be another war for seizing the heavens in the future. I also wanted to see what those so-called strange races are like. But when I reached one of the mountains in front, I suddenly felt an extremely dangerous aura. The 9 serenities and 14 masters' eyes shone with a gloomy light, and he said, "It's been too long since anyone could make me feel danger, so I couldn't help but be curious. I went over to take a look, and unexpectedly saw a monster absorbing something from the corpses of some wild beasts." Absorbing something from the corpses of the wild beasts. Jun Moxie furrowed his brows tightly. Could this guy be a zombie? But it didn't seem like it. Zombies also had real bodies, and once their bodies dissipated, they would be finished. Besides, the few mountains that the 9 serenities and 14 masters passed through were all volcanoes that had erupted with lava before. Even if there were wild beast corpses in the forest, even if they were not completely burned by the lava, they should have dried up long ago, right? So what was this monster absorbing? What could it absorb? I saw that this thing was too dirty, so I decided to get rid of it. But I didn't expect that this guy was actually unkillable. The 9 serenities and 14 masters' voice was extremely gloomy. I chased it all the way here, and I beat it up at least 7 or 8 times along the way. But every time I beat it up, it would become like this. After the time it takes for a stick of incense to burn, it would reform again, and I would beat it up again. This cycle has already been going on for 2 days and 2 nights. The 9 serenities and 14 masters sighed speechlessly. For the past 2 days, I haven't even drunk a drop of water. I've been attacking it blindly. I've been beating it for 2 days and 2 nights, but nothing happened to it. It's still as energetic as when we first met. If this goes on, it probably won't do anything to it, but I'll definitely die of exhaustion." Jun Moxie's eyes almost popped out. There's actually such an outrageous thing in this world. He couldn't help but feel a little dizzy. F***CK. Is this a dungeon on the computer? After killing it, it came back after a while. Outrageous? There's something even more outrageous. Just this morning, I encountered a group of damn green wolves. The 9 serenities and 14 masters cursed and said there were only 40 or 50 of them in total. I didn't care at first, but this monster swept through the wolf pack, and then those bastard wolves suddenly fell to the ground and died. When we fought again, I realized that this monster's combat power had suddenly increased by a lot. It must be because of those green wolves. That's why I shouted for you guys to quickly dodge. Jun Moxie was stunned. What is this thing? How could it have such a perverted ability? No wonder the 9 serenities and 14 masters shouted so urgently just now. Thinking of this, Jun Moxie shuddered and broke out in cold sweat. If this guy was allowed to rush into the Allied camp, how many people would die in the end? And to what extent could this monster's combat power increase to? Thinking of this, Jun Moxie didn't dare to continue thinking about it. Disaster, a devastating disaster. If such a disaster really happened, there would be no need for the strange races to come. This monster would probably be able to destroy the Allied army. Guhan's expression instantly became extremely ugly. With regards to Guhan's emotions, Jun Moxie could understand. A great battle was about to break out, and such an unimaginable monster had actually appeared. It was really no wonder that he was in a bad mood. Fortunately, because of the sudden intervention of the 9 serenities and 14 masters, the danger of this disaster had decreased by a lot. Or perhaps the luck of the Xian continent had not ended yet. That's why it was like this. Just as everyone was talking, the green smoke suddenly began to spin violently. It spun faster and faster until there was a whooshing sound, and finally, it formed a shadow in midair. And within that shadow, there seemed to be a faint human figure gradually forming. F***CK. It's like this every time. It's coming again. The 9 serenities and 14 masters cursed with some grief and indignation. How can we kill this monster? Can't it attack after it's been scattered? If it can't fight back, why don't you try to completely destroy it? June Moxie asked. It's true that it can't fight back after it's scattered, but that green smoke is basically a mass of air. No matter what kind of power you use, you can't hurt it at all. The 9 serenities and 14 masters turned around and glared fiercely at June Moxie. If it could be directly destroyed after scattering, I would have thrown half of it in the western regions, the other half to the East Seas, the other half to Blizzard Silver City, and the last half to Pillar of Heaven's Mountains. I'm not stupid. Why are you looking at me like that? June Moxie slapped his forehead speechlessly. Just as he was about to speak, he was stopped by the 9 serenities and 14 masters. It's useless. I've tried everything. Extreme cold and extreme heat have no effect on it. F***CK. What kind of monster is this? How can it be so domineering? June Moxie cursed. You asked me, who should I ask? I also want to know. The 9 serenities and 14 masters rolled his eyes speechlessly. Right at this moment, a sharp whooshing sound suddenly rang out. Immediately after, the green mist in the air suddenly disappeared, and a monster that was about the height of a normal human suddenly appeared. It turned its featureless head and suddenly rushed past the 3 of them with a whoosh. Looking at its direction, it was clearly in the direction of the Allied Army's camp. Whoosh! This time, the one with the fastest reaction was Guhan. In a flash, he had blocked the monster. Without saying a word, he struck out a few heavy palms in succession. With a few bangs, the monster's movements were somewhat sluggish as it took a few steps back. Then, it seemed to become more and more agile as it flew in the air. In the next moment, it actually increased to the point where it could attack and defend against Guhan. In addition, it had an immortal body and could devour life. The threat it posed was probably even greater than the invasion of the mutated races. The more June Moxie observed, the stranger he felt. Chapter 1190. This monster, if you said he was a human, would humans behave like this? But if you said he was not, other than the fact that he did not have facial features and could not speak, he was not much different from a human expert. I'll hold the fort. You should take a rest. June Moxie took out a large pot of water, a pot of wine, a few large pieces of fragrant meat, and a dozen steaming steam buns from the Hongjun Pagoda. Hurry up and eat. I might need you to take over later. 9 serenities and 14 masters' eyes lit up. I didn't expect you to carry so many good things with you. What technique is this? In any case, it's a unique move. Don't you know who this young master is? June Moxie felt like he was showing off. But he did not hear 9 serenities and 14 masters reply. When he looked back, this guy was raising his head and gulping down the big bag of wine. Then there was a series of gulping sounds. The water bag dried up at a speed visible to the naked eye. Then, without washing his hands, he grabbed a large piece of meat and took a big gulp. June Moxie's eyes widened. He had swallowed at least half a caddy of meat in one gulp. He had actually swallowed it after flattening it in his mouth. From the looks of it, the 9 nether 14th young master was really quite tired and hungry after these 2 days and nights. He had consumed a considerable amount of energy. But when he reflected on 9 serenities and 14 masters' current state, not only did June Moxie not find it funny, but he was shocked and horrified. What kind of person was 9 serenities and 14 masters? To put it bluntly, even if he did not eat or drink for a year, nothing would happen to him, and he would not be in such a state. Moreover, with 9 serenities and 14 masters' exquisite cultivation, all the pores on his body could breathe and absorb foreign substances. As long as he had the thought of drinking water, he only needed to use his cultivation to gather enough drinking water in a very short time. Even if you buried him in the ground, as long as he wanted to drink water, he would still be able to drink the sweet spring water. He could even drink it without moving. But now he was so thirsty and hungry. This proved that in the past 2 days and 2 nights, the 9 serenities and 14 masters had been pushing their limits every single moment. Even when they had completely destroyed their opponents, they still could not rest. They had to conserve every bit of energy and wait for the next round of attacks. Over the past 2 days and 2 nights, the 9 Serenities and 14 Masters had the absolute upper hand. However, against an opponent that could not be killed by any means, having the upper hand was meaningless. At most, they could only ensure that they would not be killed by the opponent. Apart from that, there was no other way. What a terrifying thing this was against such a monster. If not for the 9 Serenities and 14 Masters, no one would have been able to hold on until now. They might not even be able to escape unscathed. Fortunately, it was the 9 Serenities and 14 Masters who first discovered him. At this moment, Jun Moxie was so shocked that he was speechless. A loud boom rang out, followed by Guhan's furious roar. It was filled with rage and endless hatred. It's you. It's you. It's actually you. You're the center of the continent. You bastard who deserves to be hacked into pieces. I will. Jun Moxie and the 9 Serenities and 14 Masters turned to look at Guhan at the same time. Guhan actually knew this monster? The monster still did not make a single sound. It continued to silently deal with Guhan's crazy attacks. From time to time, it would look for an opening to break through Guhan's obstruction and escape to the allied troops dozens of li away. However, at this moment, Guhan seemed to have suddenly gone mad. He attacked crazily without a care for his life. He roared again and again, the veins on his face bulging. Jun Moxie could clearly see that Guhan's eyes had turned as red as blood. Who is he? Jun Moxie asked. The moment Jun Moxie asked this, even the 9 Serenities and 14 Masters immediately stopped chewing and looked at Guhan. This is the 9 illusory quicksand. The 9 illusory quicksand that the 3 Holy Lands have accumulated for over 10,000 years. Guhan's voice sounded like he was crying. This darn bastard, he actually used the 9 illusory quicksand to reconstruct his own body. This bastard, this bastard. What a sick bastard. It's Zhang Kuang. Jun Moxie jumped up in shock. He looked in disbelief at this extremely ugly monster that had no eyes, mouth, ears, or nose. This is actually Zhang Kuang? Zhang Lunhui? Could it be that after he escaped from the volcano, he discovered that his body was completely destroyed, and with no other choice, he used the 9 illusory quicksand to reconstruct his own body? But how is this possible? Zhang Kuang? Isn't Zhang Kuang one of the 8 personal disciples of Miao Qing Cheng from the Misty Mansion? The 9 Serenities and 14 Masters asked with half a piece of meat in his mouth. He's actually not dead yet? Without waiting for Jun Moxie's reply, he sighed and said, no wonder he's so difficult to deal with. So if it's him, no wonder. Guhan was not the only one who was enraged. Ever since Jun Moxie and Guhan came over, that monster had not made a single sound. Just when Guhan saw through his true identity and was enraged, that monster also let out a strange cry at the same time. As mentioned earlier, he did not have any facial features on his head, so naturally, he did not have a mouth. No one knew where that cry came from, but in that cry, it was actually filled with indescribable rage and hatred. This monster was indeed Zhang Kuang, the Zhang Lunhui from back then, the culprit who single-handedly destroyed the pillar of Heaven's mountains. But right now, there was an indescribable rage and frustration in Zhang Kuang's heart. Although he had single-handedly destroyed Mount Heaven Saint and caused a calamity in the continent, and even caused the entire 3 Holy Lands to become the scapegoat, causing the 3 Holy Lands to hate him to the bone. But at the same time, he had also been thrown into the mouth of a volcano by the combined forces of Jun Moxie and the 3 Holy Lands. His body had been completely incinerated and could not be used again. It was like a person who was still alive had been forcefully pushed into a crematorium's furnace. Although his spirit still existed, and he could barely take on a human form, he was only a wisp of green smoke. Zhang Kuang was also filled with grief and indignation. Speaking of which, Zhang Kuang had only fallen to this state because of his own sins. Unless he had no other choice, he would never have forcefully used the 9 illusory quicksand as a material to reconstruct his body. The 9 illusory quicksand was a miraculous treasure of heaven and earth and had countless uses. but it was ultimately not a body that was born from 10 months of gestation. Compared to a normal human body, the 9 illusory quicksand had many more uses, but it would lose even more. And more importantly, he had brazenly stolen all of the 9 illusory quicksand. It could be said to be an important item that the Jean family's ancestors had been longing for 10,000 years. The 9 illusory quicksand was an indispensable and irreplaceable item to maintain the daily operations of the Misty Mansion. As long as they had this treasure, it was equivalent to having the throat of the entire Misty illusory manor in their hands. With this treasure, they would have the dominant position in the Misty illusory manor. So this treasure was extremely important to the Jean family. If Jean Quang did not place so much importance on the Jean family, why would he have planned this series of schemes for 8,000 years? Unless he had no other choice, why would Jean Quang bear to use such a precious and irreplaceable item to reconstruct his own body? Everything was because time waited for no man. If he didn't use it, he could only wait for his soul to dissipate. After 10,000 years, he had finally obtained the 9 illusory quicksand with great difficulty. But he could only use it to reconstruct his own body. How could Jean Quang not be furious? How could he not be sullen? But even if he used the 9 illusory quicksand and managed to preserve his life, it did not mean that everything was fine. Because of the unique properties of the 9 illusory quicksand, Jean Quang's soul would be preserved after the fusion, but he would no longer be a person. A person without any human characteristics, without any sense of touch, taste, or any other senses, even if he had a human-like outer shell. Could he still be called a person? He was just a monster. Although Jean Quang was a peerless expert, he was still a man at the end of the day. He still had that impulse. But after using the 9 illusory quicksand to reconstruct his new body, even if he was burned to ashes by the flames of lust in his heart, that thing down there would not move at all. And it didn't seem like there was anything down there. Something that didn't even have facial features. So how could there be something so intricate? The only thing that remained was the aftertaste of the past and the flames of lust that couldn't be vented. One could imagine a certain person feeling hungry and crazily eating a bunch of things. But then he felt that his stomach wasn't feeling well, and he just had no way of excreting it. In the end, he had no choice but to dig out his own stomach and take everything out. Any normal person who encountered such a thing, whether it was the person involved or the bystanders, they would definitely not be able to take it, right? Furthermore, the 9 illusory quicksand was almost completely transparent. You could drink a few cups of water, but you could clearly see that the water was swimming around in your body. His entire person was like a glass bottle. No, it should be said that the current Jean Luen Hui was a human-shaped glass bottle, and a rather thick glass bottle. It wouldn't shatter easily, and even if it shattered, it could recover in an extremely short period of time. So facing Gu Han's criticism, Jean Quang was so depressed that he was going crazy. Could it be that I want to use this damn thing? I still want to be a human. But it's all of you who have forced me to the point where I no longer have the possibility of being a human. And the most despicable thing is that all of you have forced me to even lose the right to be a man. And now you still want to express your indignation at me for using the 9 illusory quicksand? If he hadn't destroyed the pillar of heaven's mountains and plunged everything into an unprecedented calamity, then no matter what, he would be able to find a human body nearby and attach himself to it. After he left this place, he could just find a better body. However, he had stolen all of the 9 illusory quicksand, causing the pillar of heaven's mountains to collapse and countless volcanoes to erupt. Apart from a few extremely strong people from the 3 holy lands, it could be said to be desolate and uninhabited. And after the 3 holy lands had gone through this mess, they really did not have any worries at all, bringing everyone to the battlefield. That's right, they didn't even have a home to return to, so why would they need to leave people behind to look after their home? Chapter 1191. Thus, after drifting for a few days, Jean Quang's soul finally couldn't take it anymore. Either his soul was completely destroyed, or he had to take the final step. This was because Jean Quang's foundation was too strong. If he wasn't in such a dangerous environment, With the toughness of his soul, it wouldn't be a problem for him to find a human to possess. But there were volcanoes everywhere, and the temperature was frighteningly high. Even in places where the volcanoes weren't erupting, a raw egg would be cooked in the blink of an eye. A soul could withstand all kinds of cold and negative conditions, but it couldn't withstand this kind of extreme heat, especially when there was poison in the heat, causing the soul to shrink even further. Thus, Zhang Kuang realized that there was no way he could walk out of this place. Left with no other choice, Zhang Kuang finally entered his own soul space and took out the 9 illusory quicksand that he had spent so much effort to obtain. He used up almost all of his remaining soul energy to mold it into the shape of a human body. Then, he placed his own Yuan spirit into it. After spending another 2 days and 2 nights to fuse with it, he finally succeeded. His Yuan spirit and the 9 illusory quicksand fused into one. But the situation after the merging caused Zhang Kuang to break down. There was no way he wouldn't break down. His body could barely be considered human, but his head was just a decoration. There was no face, no nose, no mouth, no eyes, and no ears. In short, there was nothing on his head. What the hell was this? As for the more delicate things like his internal organs, meridians, and the thing that men valued the most, they were all missing. Then was his current body still considered body? Was he still a human? In his momentary breakdown, Zhang Kuang quickly came up with a countermeasure. Actually, there was a countermeasure that could make up for these shortcomings. These missing things were the most delicate organs in the human body and naturally required a long period of nurturing. To regenerate these things, as long as he provided a large amount of blood essence and used some evil methods to refine them, he could still regrow them. What he lacked now was people, a large number of people. But now that the surrounding 10,000 li had turned into a purgatory, how many living beings could there be for him to absorb blood essence from? After a certain time, the 9 illusory quicksand effects would completely end, and he would have to remain in this state forever. How could the prideful Zhang Kuang endure this? Left with no other choice, Zhang Kuang had no choice but to absorb a few dried corpses. Although his body didn't have any reaction, how could he change his habits of being a human for nearly 10,000 years? Especially when it was the carcass of a wild beast that had been roasted dry by the volcanic eruption and had become smelly and moldy after a long time. Just as Zhang Kuang had made up his mind and forced himself to swallow the nausea and absorb the 2 corpses, the 9 serenities and 14 masters suddenly appeared at this crucial moment. Faced with such a scene, the 9 serenities and 14 masters were shocked. They cursed the disgusting monsters and started fighting. Zhang Kuang was feeling extremely aggrieved right now. Seeing how this fellow was trying to deal with him without even trying to differentiate between right and wrong, he was even more enraged. Without saying a single word, the 2 of them began to engage in an intense battle. Up until now, the 2 of them had been fighting for several days and nights, but they were still in a daze. Although Zhang Kuang had determined from the 9 Nether 14th Young Master's martial arts that the other party was the famous 9 Nether 14th Young Master, he had no idea why this fellow would make a move against him. Even if I look a little disgusting now, you can't just kill me like this, right? Did I offend you? F***CK. Is it a crime to be ugly? Do you think I want to look like this? What was even more depressing was that if he was at his peak, his strength would definitely be higher than that of the 9 serenities and 14 masters. In fact, it would be much higher. Even though he couldn't say that he could do anything to the 9 serenities and 14 masters, he wouldn't be at a complete disadvantage. He would be able to fight whenever he wanted and leave whenever he wanted. But now, the result of the battle was that he couldn't fight back at all. Moreover, he would be beaten up every once in a while. If it wasn't for the 9 illusory quicksand's miraculous indestructibility, he would have died a long time ago. There was no need to mention this grievance. As for the 9 serenities and 14 masters, who had the upper hand, he was just as depressed. He thought that it would be a small matter, and he would be able to take care of that disgusting monster easily. Then, he would head to the war for seizing the heavens, drink some wine, and hum a tune, and watched the three Holy Lands fight with the strange races. If he was in a good mood, he would intervene. According to normal thinking, what kind of combat power could a random monster have? He had killed quite a number of monsters. Who would have thought that the monster they'd met this time would be so perverse? Not only was his battle prowess high, he was actually unkillable. Towards the end, even someone as powerful as the 9 Nether 14th young master was starting to feel depressed and bored. After being smashed, it would reform itself. And after being reformed, it did not weaken at all. It still maintained its previous level of strength. Speaking of which, Zhang Kuang did not know that the 9 illusory quicksand had the miraculous ability to reform his body. He thought that he was done for after being beaten up the first time. Who would have thought that he would actually come back to life? After so much depression, this was the only thing that gave Zhang Kuang a little surprise and comfort. Who knew? He might really be immortal in the future. However, it was still rather uncomfortable to exist in this kind of immortal form. He had even lost the most basic part of being a man. It would be strange if he could still be at ease. In the battlefield, Guhan's roar was like thunder. Every palm strike was like a bolt of lightning, getting faster and faster. Finally, after a series of crisp sounds, there was a loud explosion. Zhang Kuang's translucent body once again turned into a cloud of green smoke. After a round of intense battle, Guhan's old face was covered in sweat. Old Man Gu's current strength was more than 1 level lower than the 9 Serenities and 14 Masters. If it was before Guhan's cultivation level dropped, even if he was not as strong as the 9 Serenities and 14 Masters, he was not too far off. But now he was a far cry from it. Old Man Gu, let me try. Perhaps I have a way to deal with this scourge. Jun Moxie's eyes flashed with a cold light. With a flip of his hand, a ball of black flames suddenly appeared in his palm. Flame of primal chaos. It was the flame of primal chaos that could incinerate all things. This was also the most effective method that Jun Moxie had determined to deal with the current situation. At the same time, it was also the best method that Jun Moxie had determined to destroy Zhang Kuang. At this moment, Zhang Kuang's body had scattered into a cloud of green smoke. He stood there motionless, like a lamb waiting to be slaughtered. This was a heaven-sent opportunity. If he did not act now, when would he? Facing this monster in front of him, who could not die even after being beaten up, who could regenerate in an extremely short period of time, and whose battle prowess would not decrease at all after recovery. He was impervious to fire and water, and even swords could not harm him. Furthermore, he was a monster that could increase his strength by swallowing the flesh and blood of other living beings. Naturally, it was best to get rid of him as soon as possible. Other than the flame of primal chaos, even Jun Moxie could not think of any other way to truly kill this monster in front of him. He could only place his hopes on the flame of primal chaos that had never failed before. Would the flame of primal chaos, which had never failed before, be as invincible as it was in the past? When Guhan saw the black flames appear in Jun Moxie's hands once again, his face changed and a look of fear appeared in his eyes. He immediately retreated to the side. Although he knew that the black flames would definitely not target him, he was still afraid that he would accidentally come in contact with it. Guhan knew very well how terrifying this flame was. A few days ago, Jun Moxie had used the flames to seal the entrance of the cave. Then, the flames had slowly descended. Even the toughness and coldness of the rare essence ice had been unable to stop or extinguish the black flames. Moreover, not a single one of those 40 experts had been able to escape because of the flames. In the end, even their corpses and souls had been turned into nothingness. This time, no matter how unkillable Zhang Kuang was, he would definitely be turned into ashes by this domineering flame. Completely annihilated, Jun Moxie's body slowly floated into the air, arriving beside the green smoke in the blink of an eye. With a wave of his hand, the flame of primal chaos exploded into tiny bits and pieces, slowly falling into the smoke. Following that, he quickly retreated. The 9 Serenities and 14 Masters and Guhan's eyes widened as they watched on with hope. With such a monster eyeing them like a tiger watching its prey, no one would be able to eat or sleep well. Although this monster didn't seem too difficult to deal with, as long as one had enough strength, they would be able to kill it after a while. However, the biggest problem now was that they didn't have any way to kill it. If they continued to fight like this, no matter how powerful an expert was, he would still be exhausted to death. After all, it was regenerating on the spot without any losses. The three of them watched with rapt attention. June Moxie's face also changed color. After a while, the three of them revealed expressions of disbelief. The 9 Serenities and 14 Masters had seen the flame of primal chaos before, so they naturally understood that this flame was the ultimate destructive power that could burn anything. Thus, they had great hopes that they would be able to accomplish something. But now, a look of disappointment appeared on their faces. The truth was right in front of them. In the air, the green smoke was still floating faintly, while the flame of primal chaos stayed within the green smoke and continued to burn at a steady pace. However, the green mist was completely indifferent to this. The green smoke and the flame of primal chaos were still in the air. Although the flame of primal chaos continued to burn within the green smoke, the two seemed to be in a stalemate, not interfering with each other. June Moxie's eyeballs almost popped out of their sockets. What was going on? Could it be that the flame of primal chaos actually failed? The flame of primal chaos could burn everything in the world, even space and souls. So why couldn't it burn that damn green smoke today? Chapter 1192. Guhan looked helplessly at the black flames in the air, a look of disappointment on his face. The 9 illusory quicksand is a divine object, and its origins are mysterious. No one is clear about it. As for its use, I'm also not very clear about it. I only know that the 9 illusory quicksand is a necessary item to maintain the entire misty illusory manner. Judging from this, the 9 illusory quicksand should be related to the energy of space. As for what exactly it counters, I really don't know. It might be related to space? June Moxie furrowed his brows. What exactly was this 9 illusory quicksand? June Dashao naturally didn't know that although the flame of chaos was a spiritual object that could incinerate everything in the world, the level of this 9 illusory quicksand wasn't low either. It was also formed from heaven and earth. Of course, this was formed from heaven and earth because the 9 Nether First Young Master had used an extremely heaven-defying method to lock down the heavenly Yuan Qi and continuously produce it. It could be considered as a man-made, connate spiritual object. Although the flame of chaos could even incinerate space and souls, this 9 illusory quicksand was a connate spiritual object that was completely different from the connate spiritual objects of this world. Its essence was not any weaker than the flame of chaos. At most, it was just a hair's difference. As for what Guhan said, it belonged to the category of space. But it wasn't considered wrong, because this 9 illusory quicksand was a medium to create space. There was a saying in Buddhism, a world in a grain of sand. And this 9 illusory quicksand was something similar. Although it was far from being as awesome as a world in a grain of sand, it was similarly miraculous. Even if it was just a grain of sand, it had boundless miraculous uses. Otherwise, how could a few grains of 9 illusory quicksand be able to maintain a huge world like the Misty Mansion for such a long time? And this time, Zhang Kuang had used all the 9 illusory quicksand in the world to reconstruct his body. The amount of energy contained in his body could be imagined. And the current Zhang Kuang hadn't even discovered a tenth of the miraculous uses of the 9 illusory quicksand. It was already so terrifying. Just as June Moxie was deep in thought, the flame of chaos was still maintaining its original shape, but the green smoke was slowly retreating. It scattered into wisps and wisps from the area where the flame of chaos was scattered and retreated with great agility. Then, it turned into a tiny green whirlwind 30 feet in front of him. Whooshing sounds were emitted. It was clear that Zhang Kuang was going to take human form once more. June Moxie frowned. With a wave of his hand, the flame of chaos disappeared. Since it was useless, there was no need to keep it outside. This thing didn't differentiate between friend and foe. if Guhan or the Nine Nether first young master were to encounter it. Even if he could react in time, he would lose a layer of skin even if he didn't die. At this moment, Jun Dashao was extremely depressed. The flame of primal chaos, which had always been successful, had actually dropped the ball at this moment. This fact was a huge blow to Jun Moxie. Since even the flame of primal chaos couldn't do anything, then what other method was there to deal with this monster that couldn't be killed? The whooshing sounds became more and more urgent, and the green smoke in the air slowly solidified, turning into a humanoid figure that appeared in front of the three like a demon god. It's my turn to try this time. I want to personally experience what kind of monster this is. The two of you, hold the line for me. Jun Moxie's face revealed a rare, solemn expression. Without waiting for the two of them to reply, he charged forward. With a whoosh, Jun Moxie struck out with his palm. In the instant that Zhang Kuang's body solidified, he struck out with his palm. At this moment, Zhang Kuang, who'd just regained his human form, had no time to dodge. Jun Moxie's palm had already landed squarely on his chest. With a loud bang, his entire body was sent flying back tens of feet. His footing was still unstable, and he tumbled onto the ground. For this palm, Jun Moxie had purposely slowed down the speed of his attack, but increased the strength of his attack. As expected, when this fellow just solidifies, whether it's his reaction or his speed, there's a certain period of weakness. Jun Moxie thought to himself as he unleashed a torrential barrage of attacks. After being hit for tens of times, Zhang Kuang's body's reaction became more and more sensitive, and his counterattacks also became more and more incisive. Gradually, he began to retaliate, but at this moment his body was already starting to feel a little illusory. Seeing this, Jun Moxie's eyes narrowed, and he increased the frequency of his attacks. His entire body seemed to have turned into a puff of green smoke in the air, and only the sound of punches and kicks could be heard. The sound was so dense that it sounded like the beating of a drum. The 9 Serenities and 14 Masters watched the intense battle in the arena, and a strange light shone in their eyes, mixed with some shock and confusion. When they'd first met Jun Moxie outside Chrysanthemum City, Jun Moxie was only a saint at most. But in less than half a year, when the evil monarch manor was first established, this fellow had already risen to the level of a saint venerable. And today, he'd risen to the peak of a saint monarch. What kind of speed was this? Even the 9 Serenities and 14 Masters felt shocked and horrified at such a shocking speed. The first time they'd met Jun Moxie, he was just like an ant in their eyes, and they didn't even need to look him in the eye. But now, he already had the qualifications to be their opponent. Then what would happen after a period of time? What would be the difference in strength between the two of them? The 9 Serenities and 14 Masters' eyes followed Jun Moxie's figure, and a faint smile appeared on their lips. Perhaps there would be an opponent on par with him in this world, and he would no longer be lonely. In this round of battle, while Jun Moxie had the advantage, he continued to attack ferociously, hoping to defeat his opponent in the shortest time possible. As the attacks continued, Zhang Kuang's body swayed more and more, and just as he was about to fall apart, Jun Moxie suddenly retracted his hand. With a loud clang, a bright light flashed, and the blood of yellow flame pierced into Zhang Kuang's body at lightning speed. It pierced right through the dantian of Zhang Kuang's body, and then Jun Moxie retreated and watched from the side. He wanted to see if this sword could subdue Zhang Kuang. Whether or not it could cause harm to the other party was something that could not be understood in this world. The blood of yellow flame let out an excited cry and began to spin rapidly in Zhang Kuang's dantian. Under the extreme sharpness of the blood of yellow flame, a large hole suddenly appeared in Zhang Kuang's body. The entire blade of the blood of yellow flame had burrowed into his body, and from the outside, one could clearly see that the unique light of the blood of yellow flame circled around Zhang Kuang's dantian once, before suddenly rushing upwards into the heart of a normal person. It circled around for a moment, before rushing upwards again, rushing towards the brain, and then suddenly turning downwards, rampaging all over Zhang Kuang's body. It was as if the blood of yellow flame was searching for something in Zhang Kuang's body, but it seemed to be unable to find it. Zhang Kuang let out a shrill cry, and his body slowly dissipated once more. At this time, a bright light suddenly lit up, and the invincible sword chi of the blood of yellow flame suddenly exploded within Zhang Kuang's body. With a loud hong, Zhang Kuang's entire body exploded, leaving behind a large cloud of green smoke. The blood of yellow flame spun in the air and returned to Jun Moxie's hand, trembling lightly. The blood of yellow flame's question instantly appeared in Jun Moxie's mind. What is this fellow? Why is his soul so strange, and I can't absorb it? You can't absorb his soul? Jun Moxie's eyes widened, and he asked, then can you absorb his body? Whether it was Zhang Kuang's soul or the 9 illusory quicksand that formed his body, as long as one of them could be destroyed, the other would not be a problem. I can't either. What the hell is that thing? Why is it so strange? The blood of yellow flame was obviously a little unhappy, and there was even a hint of craziness in it that Jun Moxie could not understand. What's wrong? Jun Moxie's sensitive senses detected that the blood of yellow flame's emotions were not right. This thing is definitely a heavenly tonic. The blood of yellow flame said aggrievedly. I was so excited just now, but after trying for a while, I realized that there's no possibility of absorbing it at all. This is too much of a blow to the sword. A heavenly tonic? How do you say that? Jun Moxie's eyes lit up. How exactly do I supplement it? You might not understand it, even if I explain it in detail. To put it simply, if you can add this into the next time you temper me, I don't need too much. Just about 1/10 of what you have now, and my strength will at least double after the tempering. Or even more. The blood of yellow flame said listlessly. It's a pity, but from the looks of it now, it's going to be very difficult, as it said that the blood of yellow flame actually let out a very human-like sigh. Just from this sigh alone, one would feel that the blood of yellow flame's intestines had already become knotted up, if it had intestines at all. Jun Moxie also sighed. It was indeed quite difficult. This thing was indestructible and could not be killed, not to mention adding it into the sword. If Zhang Kuang's soul was not destroyed, even if it could be added into the sword, Jun Moxie would not dare to do so. Zhang Kuang's soul was extremely monstrous. If the blood of yellow flame swallowed the sword spirit, it would be completely troublesome. But this thing is also of great benefit to you. The blood of yellow flame's next sentence caused Jun Moxie's body to tremble. For what I can feel, the energy you use to refine me seems to have the effect of opening up a space. And this strange thing in front of me seems to have some similarities with that energy of yours, and it should be a rather high-grade medium. High-grade medium. Jun Moxie instantly looked at Zhang Kuang's body with an extremely greedy gaze, and his eyes shone with a green light. He was like a thirsty hoodlum, salivating at the sight of a beautiful girl. Jun Moxie knew what he was lacking too well. His cultivation was undoubtedly rising at an extremely fast speed, but the independent space in his body that the art of unlocking heaven's fortune had opened up did not change at all. There was still only the sky and earth, a stretch of chaos. There wasn't even a sun, moon, or stars. There were no changes there, which meant that his art of unlocking heaven's fortune did not have any progress. And if there was no progress in the art of unlocking heaven's fortune, then even if he exploded with all the Ling Qi in his body, he would still not be able to advance. What he had improved was only the strength of his Xian cultivation, but the realm of the art of unlocking heaven's fortune had not changed at all. If he wanted to make any progress in the realm of the art of unlocking heaven's fortune, he would need some sort of opportunity to evolve. Chapter 1193. Jun Moxie suddenly thought, could it be that I lack this kind of medium? The way Jun Moxie looked at Zhang Kuang was like how Zhu Beiji looked at a ginseng fruit. This kind of gaze caused 9 serenities and 14 masters to feel goosebumps all over their bodies. Isn't this a little too intimate? However, Jun Moxie did not dare to act rashly, because Zhang Kuang's soul was still inside. If he brought this fellow into the Hongjun Pagoda in one piece, who knew what kind of accident would happen? This fellow was the definition of a destructive maniac. It was better to be careful. But how should he be careful? How should he separate the two? Jun Moxie furrowed his brows as he looked at the smoke in the air, deep in thought. Just how should he separate this fellow's soul from his body? Seeing Zhang Kuang's body slowly condensing again in the air, obviously about to reform back into his human form, Jun Moxie suddenly made up his mind and disappeared. He disappeared so quickly that he did not even have time to keep the blood of yellow flame. He just wandered around outside. 9 serenities and 14 masters in Guhan did not know what Jun Dashao was going to do. They could not help but look around with their eyes wide open. Could it be that this fellow saw that this thing was too perverted and ran away in fear? That can't be, right? In the next instant, a layer of water mist suddenly appeared in the air, covering a radius of several tens of zhang. Then it gradually condensed and enveloped the green smoke that Zhang Kuang had transformed into. Then it turned into water droplets and quickly froze. But the green smoke did not change because of the change in temperature. It continued to float in the ice, as if it was not affected at all. Jun Moxie's body appeared again. With a point of his finger, an extremely cold chi was emitted from the tip of his finger. Under the dumbfounded eyes of 9 serenities and 14 masters in Guhan, the piece of ice that had condensed previously had turned from an ordinary piece of ice into solid ice. In the blink of an eye, it had turned into Xian ice. This was the first time the 9 serenities and 14 masters had seen such a shocking change. They could not help but rub their eyes. He couldn't believe what he was seeing, but when he opened his eyes again, he couldn't help but be shocked. Because the profound ice in front of him no longer existed. Because the profound ice had become essence of ice. Essence of ice. It was actually essence of ice. 9 serenities and 14 masters felt like they were going to faint. This kind of rare treasure that could not be found in 100 lifetimes, and it was so easily formed in front of his eyes. Moreover, it was formed in an instant by human power. Of course, the 9 serenities and 14 masters did not know that Jun Moxie had once again activated the power of the Hongjun Pagoda. If he wanted to instantly condense water into essence of ice with his own strength, it would be impossible even if he was beaten to death. The essence of ice in front of him was completely transparent, although the green smoke could still move slightly within the essence of ice, and even a small part of it had successfully floated out. It could be seen that its movement speed had slowed down a lot under the extreme cold of the essence of ice. Jun Moxie waved his hand, and the blood of yellow flame flashed coldly into his hand. Without any hesitation, Jun Moxie focused all his spiritual energy on the blood of yellow flame the moment the green smoke slowed down a little. He raised his sword high and slashed down. The sound of wind and thunder rang out. This sword strike from such a close distance was actually as powerful as the heavens falling and the earth splitting. Jun Moxie's target was a corner of the essence of ice in front of him. There was not much green smoke in this corner. At most, it was only 1/20th of the total amount. Chua! The blade and the essence of ice collided head-on. Immediately, a burst of multicolored brilliance erupted in the air. Unexpectedly, there wasn't the slightest sound as the essence of ice fell to the ground. Within the essence of ice that had fallen, a small amount of green smoke let out a strange hiss, and a white shadow immediately flew out. Behind it, the green smoke trapped within the essence of ice also seemed to be struggling to escape. Jun Moxie casually pointed, and the blood of yellow flame slashed at the weak white light. At the same time, Jun Moxie raised his hand, and the essence of ice that he had chopped off completely disappeared in the blink of an eye. It had been kept into the Hongjun Pagoda by Jun Dashao. As for the white light, it suddenly let out an almost soundless but soul-shaking scream the moment it was struck by the blood of yellow flame. In that instant, it was split into 3 parts. 2 of the parts separated from the tip of the sword, and when the last part came into contact with the tip of the sword, the blood of yellow flame suddenly glowed brightly, swallowing the white light. At the same time, the green smoke that was trapped within the large piece of essence of ice and the smoke in the outside world surged violently. Then, an extremely terrifying and trembling hiss sounded. With a bang, the large piece of essence of ice actually exploded, and a wisp of green smoke gathered together at a speed completely different from before. Then, it let out a shrill scream and tore through the air. Before they could even blink, the green light had already disappeared into the horizon. It was as fast as lightning, and with such speed, even the 9 Serenities and 14 Masters and June Moxie did not have the time to stop it. As the 3 of them stared at each other in dismay, the blood of yellow flame suddenly burst forth with a strange light. The light was so bright that the 3 of them could not even open their eyes, following which it let out a sword cry filled with pain, and the entire sword suddenly began to tremble. That small dot of light just now, although it was small, was actually a part of Zhang Kuang's entire soul, and his soul was hidden within the 9 illusory quicksand. Once it was sealed by the extreme cold, it would naturally be scattered everywhere. And when June Moxie had taken the risk to strike out with his sword, he had made use of the moment when his soul was sealed by the essence of ice, causing him to not be able to retract his soul in time. In the end, it just happened to cut off a small part of Zhang Kuang's soul. And the attack of the blood of yellow flame was precisely to strike at the midstream. It accurately intercepted that small part of Zhang Kuang's soul and immediately began to devour it, completely cutting off any chance of escape. But Zhang Kuang's soul was truly powerful. In the instant that he sensed that something was wrong, he was actually able to make a prompt decision. Like a warrior cutting off his wrist, he split that small part of his soul into 3 parts, allowing 2/3 of it to escape from the blood of yellow flame's sword. And the intense reaction of the blood of yellow flame just now was due to the backlash from devouring that small part of Zhang Kuang's soul. Such an intense reaction caused even June Moxie to jump in fright. As a second-grade Saint Monarch, Jibo one could easily devour the blood of yellow flame without any difficulty. However, Zhang Kuang's soul fragment didn't even seem to be 1% of the original blood of yellow flame. How could it have such a strong backlash? It was even able to compete with the blood of yellow flame's main body, the sword spirit. June Moxie snorted and grabbed the hilt of the sword, injecting his own pure art of unlocking heaven's fortune's spiritual chi into it. With such a powerful boost, the blood of yellow flame's spirit was greatly boosted, and the light it emitted became more and more dazzling. After a short while, a bright sword cry rang out, and a round sword chi shot out from the tip of the sword, piercing through the clouds and disappearing without a trace. The blood of yellow flame's childish voice rang out in June Moxie's mind. How dangerous! How could this fellow's soul be so strong? I was caught off guard, and this Lord Sword nearly suffered a huge loss. June Moxie seemed to have seen a 7- or 8-year-old boy wiping his cold sweat, and he couldn't help but smile. This fellow, he almost suffered a huge loss, and he still dares to call himself a lord. Is there anyone who acts like a lord? But in his heart, he couldn't help but sigh in relief. Luckily, he didn't keep the entire essence of ice into the Hongjun Pagoda. From the looks of it, if that fellow had really entered the Hongjun Pagoda, he might even be able to snatch control of the Hongjun Pagoda from him. And from the looks of it, he might really not be able to deal with him. It was just 1% of the soul fragment, and the blood of yellow flame couldn't even subdue it by itself. This Zhang Kuang's strength was really too strong. June Moxie thought for a moment, and then felt relieved. After all, he was an old demon that had lived for tens of thousands of years. How strong would a soul that had lived for tens of thousands of years be? Furthermore, he was the direct disciple of the 9 Nether First Young Master. If he wasn't this strong, he would instead find it strange. Although the 2 experts, the 9 Serenities and 14 Masters in Guhan, had witnessed the development of the situation, they still didn't know what was going on. Both of them looked at young Master June in bewilderment, completely bewildered. What was going on? Wasn't the green mist that Zhang Kuang had transformed into unable to move? Why was it able to move in an instant? What's more, it was a movement that was as fast as lightning. It was so fast that they didn't even have time to react. This was really strange. What the 2 of them didn't know was that Zhang Kuang had felt a life-threatening danger just now, and had decisively chosen to ignite his soul, using all the remaining potential in his body to blow up the essence of ice and flee for his life. Although the blood of Yellow Flame had only swallowed less than 1% of his soul, the damage this time was permanent to Zhang Kuang. Although Zhang Kuang could temporarily escape with lightning speed, as long as the energy from the secret technique disappeared, he would fall from the sky, and his strength would fall by a large margin. Now that he's gone, who knows when we'll have the chance to trap him again? Guhan sighed. If he's allowed to absorb too much blood essence and regrow his human organs, then Zhang Kuang's strength will return to the peak of his life. At that time, the continent will once again fall into danger, or perhaps even greater than the current danger. The 9 Serenities and 14 Masters nodded in agreement. Jun Moxie's mood was also a little heavy. No matter what, we can only take it one step at a time. The battle in front of us is the most important. Let's deal with the matters in the future. But in his heart, he was thinking, his soul is not complete right now. Can he still return to his peak? Guhan and 9 Serenities sighed at the same time. This was the only way. Within the Hongjun Pagoda, Jun Moxie had just thrown the entire piece of essence of ice into the 6th level of the Hongjun Pagoda. Right now, it was slowly disintegrating within the Hongjun Pagoda. Countless strands of primordial chaos, purple chi, swirled around. According to Jun Moxie's will, the essence of ice was gradually disintegrating bit by bit. Apart from that, the primordial chaos purple chi was also continuously seeping into the green smoke. Jun Moxie was waiting and looking forward to whether the Hongjun Pagoda would be able to restore this small piece of green smoke back to its original form. I really can't write anymore today. These few days, my nerves have been stretched taut, and I haven't relaxed at all. Ever since I started making up for my debt, I've been bursting with energy for nearly a month. Thank you, brothers, for your support. Thank you all for your monthly votes and recommendation votes. Thank you to the Fire Beacon's diehard supporters, young Master Fei Fei, and all the other brothers for their generous rewards. Thank you all for letting me know that I'm not alone. Chapter 1194. The 4th chapter on the 1st has ended. Everyone, please support me with your monthly votes. This month, Feng Ling wants to go crazy again. For our evil monarch's journey of fighting for the monthly votes, I want to draw a full stop that we can all feel good about. I hope everyone will accompany me through this July. This book is temporarily scheduled to end in August and end in September or October. So this July is the last month for us to shout for monthly votes. The evil monarch doesn't need any regrets. I believe that the brothers and sisters of the evil monarch also don't need any regrets. Come, let us hold hands and walk through these 31 days. We have witnessed the glory of the evil monarch together, and we are also accompanying the evil monarch towards eternity. We have accompanied the evil monarch to cry. We have also accompanied the evil monarch to laugh. We have been crazy. We have been persistent. We have even accompanied him to act like a hooligan. We have been unreasonable. We have accompanied him to make people hate him, and we have also accompanied him to be treated as a treasure. Too many of the past. Have we passed? No. No. The evil monarch needs you this month. Feng Ling needs you this month. Brothers and sisters, no matter where you are, I hope that this month you can come back and accompany me, accompany our evil monarch to fight together. The sword points to the heavens. Let us together escort this proud and aloof figure into his glory. Begging for monthly votes. Begging for recommendation votes. Begging for evaluation votes. This month, we want all kinds of votes. Crazy. Let's be crazy to the end. Brothers and sisters, let's fight. Chapter 1195. Even though I rushed, I was still too late. Sorry. If it could be restored, what kind of miraculous effects would the 9 illusory quicksand have? Would it accelerate the progress of the art of unlocking heaven's fortune? But no matter what the effects were, looking at the Hongjun Pagoda's current state, it was not something that could be achieved in a short period of time. It would definitely require time and patience. And what kind of consequences would Zhang Kuang's departure cause? These are all unknown things. The 3 of them did not speak anymore. silently thinking about their own matters as they walked back. 9 Serenities and 14 Masters was deep in thought, not realizing that they had actually followed Jun Moxie back to Tion Fa's camp. Jun Moxie, on the other hand, was secretly delighted in his heart. Another super fighter has delivered itself to my doorstep. With the addition of the 9 Nether 14th Young Master, I've gained a bit more confidence in this battle. Suddenly, all the Xian cranes that were in charge of guarding the area raised their heads and let out a long cry. The sound from Tion Fa's direction suddenly became abnormally noisy, like a flash flood, and the earth began to tremble violently. The attack that the strange races had been preparing for so long had finally begun. The previous matter had temporarily come to a rest, but the war had suddenly arrived. Even though Jun Moxie and the other 2 were used to facing powerful enemies, they could not help but have a change in expression. There was no other reason. The 3 of them had not expected that the strange race's attack would be so ferocious. There was no probing attack at all, and no signs of a decisive battle. From afar, a series of earth-shattering battle cries rang out, and the sound of collisions caused the earth to tremble. A long howl that was filled with an unyielding feeling mixed with a piercingly cold and dense killing intent suddenly sounded out, and it didn't die out for a long time. It shook the boundless dark night to the point that it was about to shrink and tremble, and the cold stars in the sky blinked ceaselessly because of fear. Brothers, this battle is not for glory. This battle is not to save the world. This battle is for our own brothers. Let us use the sharp blades in our hands to tear these strange races to shreds. Ha ha ha! All these years of bitter training, wasn't it for this day? Kill him until the heavens and earth turn upside down. The solitary falcon's vigorous and powerful voice was filled with an indifferent and untamed aura. It seemed as if his voice was filled with a bloody aura that pierced through the heavens and pierced through the sky, and pierced through the sky with a heroic spirit. Another burst of hearty laughter rang out. It was the Heaven Destroyer and Spirit Devourer troops laughing heartily. That's right. That's exactly what I'm going to do. I'm going to turn the world upside down and make blood flow like a river. Feng Wanyun bellowed, and the sword in his hand turned into a huge dragon, shooting through the sky with a majestic aura. That blinding light could be seen even from a few hundred miles away. Kill those non-humankind scums and turn the world upside down. Let their blood flow like rivers. The 300 warriors roared in unison. At this moment, the light from the long blade reflected the light from the moon and stars in the sky, surging forward. Solitary Falcon gripped the Heaven Destroyer and Spirit Devourer's standard long saber in his hand. With a wave of his hand, 4 outsiders' heads were sent flying into the sky. As blood splattered everywhere, Solitary Falcon laughed heartily. I've already killed 9 outsider scums. How many have you guys killed? Now, this leader will announce that the 2 teams will start a killing competition, and the final winner will be determined by the number of heads we have. The loser will have to bark like a dog in front of everyone. How about it? Feng Wanyun, you old bastard, just wait to bark like a dog. Ha ha ha! Feng Wanyun's sword was like a bolt of lightning, sweeping through the area like a hurricane. Wherever his sword flashed past, at least 4 or 5 strange races would die. He roared, Solitary Falcon. This match is decided, but the one who will bark like a dog will be your team. Brothers, do you want to hear Solitary Eagle bark like a dog? Yes. Ha. With Feng Wanyun leading the 2 teams, the warriors of the Spirit Devourer Division shouted in excitement. Then what are you all waiting for? Since you want to hear it, then kill as many enemies as you can. Feng Wanyun laughed heartily and pointed, Kill. How could the warriors of the Spirit Devourer Division be willing to fall behind? They raised their weapons and laughed heartily, charging towards the crowd of strange races like a gust of wind. Their faces were filled with excitement, as though they had been starving for 3 days and were charging towards a delicious feast. F***CK, Solitary Eagle cursed and roared, Brothers, let's charge as well. If the Spirit Devourer Division really wins, we will all lose face. We'd rather lose our lives than our faces. Let's move quickly, or else we won't have a target. Ah, leader is right. We'd rather lose our lives than our faces. Everyone, let's move quickly. The faster we are, the slower we get nothing. The Heaven Destroyer team laughed heartily as they raised their weapons and charged forward crazily. These two brigades actually treated this extremely tragic battle in front of them as a competitive game. Everyone's battle prowess was raised to the peak in an instant. As though they were chopping vegetables, they killed all the strange race's soldiers in their line of sight. Solitary Eagle and Foam Wanyan used this method to raise their morale, and it was indeed very effective. At the start of the battle, countless wretched cries, maniacal laughter, and howls rang out continuously. From time to time, there would be limbs and heads flying into the sky. Broken limbs flew everywhere, and blood dyed the ground red. Almost at the start of the battle, the scene had already reached an extremely tragic level. Right at this moment, an extremely sharp tiger roar shook the sky, as though a sudden gust of wind had blown. Tiger King Earthcracker's majestic body was like a towering iron pagoda as he rushed over from afar. His body hadn't arrived, but his voice had arrived first. When it comes to killing, who can compare to our Tion Fa Tiger Clan? Count our Tiger Tribe in for this bet. Brats, do you have the confidence to kill the most strange race's scums? The 3,000 Tiger Tribe warriors behind him roared in unison. Yes, since you have the confidence, then charge forward and kill all those strange race's scums for this king. Tiger King Earthcracker's eyes shone with a bloodthirsty light. Let the Heaven Destroyer and Spirit Devourer brothers witness the might of our Tiger Tribe. Kill the enemies with all your might, the might of the Tiger Tribe. Oh, witness the might of our Tiger Tribe. The 3,000 warriors roared in unison. It was truly a ferocious tiger descending the mountain. In the past, it was only a metaphor to say that it was like a ferocious tiger descending the mountain. But the charge of the Tiger Tribe this time was truly like a ferocious tiger descending the mountain. And it was 3,000 of the strongest tigers descending the mountain at the same time. This momentum was extremely ferocious and could be said to be spectacular to the extreme. As the Tiger Tribe's army entered the battlefield, the battle instantly became even more intense. Although the Heaven Destroyer, Spirit Devourer, and Tiger Tribe's numbers were far less than the enemy's, their battle strength was several times, tens of times, or even tens of times more than the enemy. Coupled with the weapons and formations that Jun Moxie had specially made for them, their strength was even more shocking. The moment both sides clashed, Tion Fa and the evil Monarch Manor's allied army gained the absolute upper hand. Like a tiger entering a flock of sheep, they slaughtered the enemy while chopping vegetables. But right at this time, a long and strange laughter rang out from afar. A sinister and strange voice rang out. Guhan, I've said it before, I will break through your so-called continent's allied army's defensive line with a righteous flag. And I, Sasho Kitajima, will personally defeat you. Today it's time for me to fulfill my promise. Guhan, if you have the guts, come out. Fight with me. The person who spoke was Sasho Kitajima. This #1 expert of strange races actually issued a challenge to the leader of the 3 holy lands, Guhan, at the start of the battle. Clearly, he had already sensed that the current situation was disadvantageous to them. Facing the powerful battle strength of Tion Fa and the evil Sex allied army, although the strange races had the advantage in numbers, they were still in a disadvantageous position. They had to think of a way to raise the morale of their own forces. Otherwise, how were they going to win? And the best way to raise the morale of their forces was to defeat the other party with a thunderous method in a battle between the #1 experts of both sides. After Sasho Kitajima finished his challenge, he roared again. Conquering the Xian continent is today. The dazzling world is right before our eyes. All the brave warriors of the Divine Sun, 1,000 years of hegemony, 10,000 years of evil arts. Lay the foundation at this moment. Is everyone willing to accompany me Sasho Kitajima, and leave my name in history. Roar. A tsunami-like roar rang out. That was the roar of hundreds of thousands of people. Clearly, Sasho Kitajima's words had successfully roused the endless fighting spirit of the strange race's warriors. The rallying power of Sasho Kitajima amongst the strange races was clear to see. If Guhan decided to accept the challenge, but unfortunately lost to this Sasho Kitajima, it would definitely be a huge blow to the morale of the allied army. At this time, Jun Moxie, Guhan, and 9 Serenities and 14 Masters had just entered the camp. In the tent, Mei Shuyan was methodically dispatching the troops. After the Tian Fa warriors received their orders, they immediately turned around and left. In the blink of an eye, Mei Shuyan had already sent out 2,400-man teams. As expected of the venerable Mei, who single-handedly supported Tian Fa after the decline of Tian Fa. But this kind of calmness in the face of battle, this kind of commanding ability, is already enough to make one sigh in admiration. Guhan let out a long sigh, his voice filled with praise. It was currently deep into the night, and it could be said that it was not advantageous for the armies of the continent to fight against the strange races. But the strange races had chosen to attack at this time because they had the advantage of time and place, and because the experts among them had the ability to conceal themselves, and in the middle of the night, this ability was even more terrifying. If they were to charge forward in a dense formation at this time, they would provide the enemy with countless targets. So when Mei Shuyan deployed the troops, she split them up into small teams. Every 100 experts would form a small team, and they would directly enter the strange race's army to assist the Heaven Destroyer, Spirit Devourer, and Tiger Tribe warriors. Chapter 1196. A total of 2,400-man teams were divided by Mei Shuyan into 8 directions: east, south, west, north, northeast, southeast, northwest, and southwest. Each direction had 300-man teams charging in from 3 different directions, and each team advanced in a cone-shaped formation. If the 3 squads were to gather together, they could form an even larger cone formation in an instant. Mei Shuyan's orders were, advance all the way. No one was allowed to retreat or look around. They only needed to find a right direction and kill their way down until their comrades met up with them in the center. Then they would follow the path their comrades had created and charge back. Once they were done, they would return immediately. Every team's mission was the same, and they would also inform Solitary Eagle, Feng Wanyun, and Tiger King. Once these 24 teams had completed their mission, they could retreat together. Although there weren't many people participating in this mission, only 2,400 in total, every single one of them was an elite expert. With such a tactic, it would definitely cause a terrifying amount of damage to the strange races. There was a high chance that the enemy's formation would be completely messed up, and they would not be able to fend for themselves. The key to ensuring this tactic was the 3,000 Tiger Tribe warriors that had entered the enemy's core, and Solitary Eagle and Feng Wanyun's Heaven Destroyer and Spirit Devourer in the center. The powerful penetration of these 24 teams, coupled with the counterattack from Solitary Eagle and Tiger King, would definitely cause a terrifying amount of damage to the strange races. At the very least, it would greatly reduce the pressure on Eagle, Wind, and Tiger King. As for the remaining tens of thousands of soldiers, they would advance 300 miles and set up a defensive formation. If any enemy tried to break through the Alliance's defensive line, these soldiers would wait for them and launch a destructive counterattack. The other 2 powerful forces of the Leopard and Lion tribe were also ready to move out. If any of the troops were caught by the enemy and could not retreat, these 2 troops would charge forward with lightning speed to rescue them. With the speed of these 2 teams, they were the best candidates to complete this rescue plan. Jun Moxie, Guhan, and 9 Serenities and 14 Masters did not have any opinions on this tactic. In such a dark and gloomy environment, they had to face the foreign races with stealth skills. Only such a plan could be considered as the most effective strategy to deal with them. A near-perfect strategy. Right at this time, Chuangshang Beidao's voice pierced through the night sky, coming from afar. Gu Han's expression changed, and he was about to reply when he saw Jun Dashao looking at him in shock, as if he had discovered a new continent. The anger that had just risen up in Gu Han's heart instantly dissipated under that strange gaze of his, and he even felt his hairs stand on end. He hurriedly lowered his head to look at his own attire, and after confirming that there was nothing wrong with it, he raised his head and said unhappily, "Why is Sect Master Jun looking at me like that?" I say, old man Gu, the one shouting outside, isn't your old lover, right?" Jun Mosie's face was full of gossip. Gu Han's face turned red, and he was filled with an indescribable sense of embarrassment and anger. He had never thought that Jun Dashao would ask such a question. What kind of question was that? There were so many people here, and Qiaoying was watching from aside. How could you ask such a stupid question? Furthermore, the other party was a strange race, a pervert with a male and female body. Asking such a question, aren't you disgusting? What nonsense are you spouting? Gu Han's face was ashen as he retorted. That's an insult to our culture, isn't it? Jun Moxie's voice was a little sad as he said, "What a pity. Why not pinch?" Gu Han's face was filled with black lines. At this moment, he had completely forgotten about his anger from Sasho Kitajima's challenge and shifted all his anger onto Jun Moxie. He gritted his teeth and said, "You bastard, what the hell are you thinking? Could it be that I guessed wrong?" Jun Moxie said innocently, "Did you hear what he shouted just now? He was waiting to be pinched on the bed, and he even swore that he would personally defeat you. TSK, TSK, TSK. This is truly a deep love, deep hatred. Old Gu is indeed a role model for us perverts to have even developed into a strange race. Look at how resentful he is. Old Gu is mighty. True love is everywhere. True love has no borders. True love is great. It's enough to start an inhumane war." This junior will ask in a small voice, "Which one did you pinch that day? The female one or the male one? It should be the female one, right? You brat, you're spouting nonsense, you." Gu Han was about to collapse. What kind of person was this Jun Moxie? How could he spout such nonsense? Did he still have the bearing of a leader? Did I spout nonsense? Could it be that I guessed wrong, and it was actually the male one? I really couldn't tell. Why is your face so ugly? Could it be that I guessed wrong again, that you're actually a man who doesn't abstain from meat or vegetables, and can enter anything? You nonsense, you brat. Gu Han was on the verge of breaking down from Jun Mosie's words, and for the first time ever, he began to scold someone. Everyone present didn't know whether to laugh or cry. Mei Shuiyin and Xiao Ying's faces were tense, but they couldn't help but smile. Mo Wudao and the rest at the side all covered their mouths and coughed loudly. 9 serenities and 14 masters didn't care who the person in question was, and he laughed out loud. Gu Han was about to fly into a rage. He didn't want to fight Sasho Kitajima, but he wanted to fight Jun Dashao first. In the distant night sky, Sasho Kitajima's voice was still clamoring. "Gu Han, come out and fight me. Gu Han, you coward. Come out, Gu Han. Fight me, Sasho Kitajima. Let's have a showdown." Chuangshang Beidao's words of challenge earlier had truly caused everyone in the allied army to be enraged. But right now, every single word he said would be met with a burst of laughter, as if they were watching a show. "Aya, old Gu, look. I can't wait to have another round with you." Jun Moxie sighed. Why do you still want to have a showdown? Could it be that when you said I was talking nonsense, you're actually saying that you're not the one, but the other party is? If not, how are we going to have a showdown? That person is already so soft after being smashed in bed, but our old Gu has a heart of steel. Really, there's no end to this. It would have been fine if he didn't say it, but now that he said it, everyone laughed even louder. Gu Han's face turned green, and he suddenly shouted toward the outside. "What the hell are you shouting for? Look at your duck-like voice. What the hell are you shouting for? You perverted bastard." Sasho Kitajima's voice suddenly stopped. Speaking of which, this Chuangshang Beidao and Gu Han were old opponents who had fought countless times. He felt that he was extremely familiar with Gu Han's personality, and was extremely confident in his challenge this time. He was confident that Guhan would not back down from battle. As long as he won this battle, everything would be settled. But at this moment, with Guhan's gentlemanly personality, why would he say such malicious words? It was really unexpected, and he didn't know how to continue. The battlefield was filled with jubilation. Solitary Eagle was bathed in blood as he flew through the enemies, laughing loudly. "You perverted bastard with a duck-like voice, what the hell are you shouting for?" The warriors under him and the Tiger Clan warriors all roared with laughter. "You perverted bastard with a duck-like voice, what the hell are you shouting for?" Ha ha ha! Even Guhan, the instigator of all this, didn't expect that his angry words would actually raise the morale of his side so much. This was really unexpected, a pleasant surprise. After a long while, an extremely suppressed and enraged voice exploded out. "Guhan, you cowardly tortoise! A gentleman does not speak such malicious words. It's fine if you don't dare to come out and fight with me, but you actually dare to humiliate me? What qualifications do you have to humiliate me? What kind of Xin continent's #1 person are you?" Before he finished speaking, a voice came from the direction of the camp, mixed with an indescribable sense of mockery. "I say, this person in, what's your name? Oh, Sasho Kitajima, right? I'm very puzzled. What did Guhan do to you? Is it worth it for you to bear such a deep grudge? And who are you?" Sasho Kitajima instantly became cautious. Although the voice sounded very young, it was full of vigor. Even though the voice came from a few hundred li away, it sounded like it was a conversation between two people without the slightest feeling of shouting. This person was definitely an expert, perhaps even more difficult to deal with than Guhan. The voice on the other side did not answer Sasho Kitajima's question. Instead, it said with interest, "I say that Sasho Kitajima, how did old man Gu humiliate you? And did he rape you? Or did he burst your chrysanthemum? Why don't you just say it in front of everyone and let everyone have a laugh?" Haha, I love listening to such stories the most. And what I mean is, justice is in the hearts of the people. Tell me the whole story clearly. If it really is old man Gu and he doesn't want to admit it, I can help you get justice. Sasho Kitajima almost fainted from anger. He roared, "Who are you? Tell me your name. How dare you say such despicable and shameless words? Are you even worthy of being called a person?" The voice chuckled and said, "How can you be so shameless? I'm trying to get justice for you out of goodwill. Why are you scolding me as well? Forget it. A bastard like you really shouldn't know the so-called etiquette and honor. This young master won't lower himself to your level. As for who I am, I won't tell you. Come over if you have the guts. This old master can humiliate you properly. Shameless, shameless." The two voices belonging to Sasho Kitajima cursed at the same time. The strange voice and the bell-like voice mixed together and instantly rang through the night sky. He really did not expect that there would be such a mischievous fellow among the peak experts of the world. Shameless? Who is the more shameless one? The voice suddenly turned cold. "You challenged me in the middle of the night. Do you think that everyone is stupid and can't tell what your intentions are? If you really have the guts, come over and fight me head on. You hide your head but show your tail, yet you still want to call others gutless. What kind of trash are you? We are gentlemen. We don't bother to say it out loud. It's enough that everyone knows it in their hearts." As soon as this sentence came out, everyone came to a sudden realization. Chapter 1197. The main target of Sasho Kitajima's attack in the middle of the night was actually Guhan. He challenged Guhan in the midst of the chaotic battle, predicting that Guhan would definitely come out no matter what. If Guhan did not come out due to various considerations, it would be a huge blow to the morale of his side. With Guhan's personality, he would definitely not be able to accept such an outcome, so he could only endure and fight. But the night was originally dark, and the strange races had such a heaven-defying technique like the art of concealment. If Guhan really went out to fight, the chances of him being ambushed by the other party was almost 80%. Such a probability was no different from sending himself to death. If Guhan was unfortunately defeated or even died here, to the Allied forces, that would be a truly heavy blow. But Sasho Kitajima's wishful thinking was completely destroyed by Jun Moxie's unreasonable pestering. Guhan was naturally not a fool with his 5,000 years of experience. How could he not understand what Sasho Kitajima was planning? He also knew that if he went out now, it would really bode ill rather than well, with only a slim chance of survival. But if he was in charge now, he still had no choice but to fight. He had no choice but to fight, because he represented the 10,000 years of glory of the three Holy Lands. Guhan could be defeated, and he could also die, but the 10,000 years of glory of the three Holy Lands could not be desecrated. Sasho Kitajima's thoughts were exposed, but he did not get angry. Instead, he laughed. That's right. This seat scheme was originally an obvious one, calculating that even if Guhan was unwilling to come out, he would still come out. Who would have thought that it would be resolved by just a few words from you? Looks like you're the one who is truly worthy of my respect. Such an expert, yet you're so stingy with your name? Jun Moxie chuckled. You're really generous to admit your own scheme. But I'm sorry, although my name is not a big secret, I cannot tell you. Why is that? Sasho Kitajima was really depressed this time. He could not think of a reason. Since the other party's name was not a secret, but he did not tell him, could it be that he wanted him to be puzzled? The reason is very simple. It's because you're too disgusting. Jun Moxie said unhurriedly, if you know my name, it would be an unbearable humiliation to me. Therefore, the later you know, the better. As soon as these words were spoken, no matter if it was the tent, the camp, or the battlefield, everyone was filled with laughter. Hearing Jun Moxie's words, the group of warriors who were already in a frenzy of killing immediately felt an incomparable sense of comfort. Then they burst into laughter. Bastard! Sasho Kitajima was also enraged. He screamed, come out, and fight me if you have the guts. Jun Moxie snorted and scolded disdainfully. F***ck off. This scolding was even more direct and decisive. It was simply powerful and resonating. Everyone, it was as if they really did not know what expression Sasho Kitajima had on his face, but their own side had already become a sea of joy. Even the gloomy experts of the three Holy Lands couldn't help but reveal a smile. In the tent, Jun Moxie looked at everyone and said seriously, the strange races are cruel and cunning by nature. Furthermore, they have the advantage in numbers. This battle can be said to be extremely dangerous. We need to have a proper plan. What does Manor Lord Jun mean to do? Guhan asked with a solemn face. Right now, we have 4 top-notch experts on our side. You, me, Shui Yin, and 9 Serenities and 14 Masters. Before Jun Moxie could finish, 9 Serenities and 14 Masters snorted coldly and interrupted him. Not 4, it's 3. I'm not on your side. This battle is between the Xin continent and the strange races. It has nothing to do with me. Whatever you say, do whatever you want. We're not counting on you anyway. 3, so be it. The 3 of us have to carry out our own duties. We must not leave our posts without permission. This is especially important. Jun Moxie rolled his eyes at 9 Serenities and 14 Masters and continued. Shui Yin has to oversee the Central Army and deploy the troops. This is very important, as she also has the heavy responsibility of guarding the base and receiving the reinforcements from the continent at any time. In addition, she also has to deploy troops according to the changes in the battlefield. You must not slack off. Mei Shuiyin agreed, her eyes filled with determination. Although her position had been arranged by Jun Moxie to be the safest, she had the heaviest responsibility. The success or failure of this battle rested in her hands, in Mei Shuiyin's hands. Mei Shuiyin's heart felt heavy. As for old Gu, you'll be in charge of the Holy Land's forces. Jun Moxie looked deeply into Guhan's eyes. Maybe tomorrow, maybe the day after, the war will break out. When the time is right, the people from the 3 Holy Lands will be the first wave of troops to push forward. Old Gu, don't forget what I said. Guhan's expression was stern as he nodded. Of course. As for myself, I'll stay at the front lines and be in charge of the battlefield. Jun Moxie placed himself in the most dangerous position. He looked at everyone sternly and said word by word, "Everyone, no matter which side you're from, you must remember one thing. This is a war, not the usual sparring in the pugilistic world, nor is it a contest between two people. This concerns the safety of billions of people. Soldiers against soldiers, generals against generals. This is the most basic knowledge on the battlefield." Jun Moxie said slowly, "Remember, the Holy Venerables have their own opponents. The Holy Emperor has his own Holy Emperor's opponent. You must not rely on a moment of bravery to kill the enemy's minions. Every bit of unnecessary effort you put in is equivalent to increasing the odds of victory for the enemy's experts of the same level. Our experts are already few in number, so we cannot waste any of them. All the Saint Venerables, even if you die to the enemy's enduring heavens without killing a single person, you must remember that you will not lose out, because you will die in the position that you should die in, and the exhaustion that you cause to the enemy. Naturally, there will be people who will seize the opportunity that you create to kill them. At that time, your mission will end, and you will have no regrets in this battle. On the other hand, even if you kill more of the strange races, you will not be able to exhaust the strength of the experts of the same level. The target of your guilt will be the billions of lives of the Xian continent." Everyone nodded their heads silently and thought about it seriously. "Please remember, even if you kill 10,000 of the strange race's ordinary soldiers, it will not make up for the loss of one of our Saint Venerables. Everyone, this war is dangerous, so I will not say any auspicious words. I will only say one thing. Even if you die, you must die with the greatest value." Jun Moxie said solemnly, his eyes shining brightly as he swept his gaze across everyone. "Does anyone have anything else to add?" Jun Moxie knew very well that these people were all uncivilized and could not be compared to a proper army. If he was facing a proper army, he might not even need to say a single word. But facing these people, he needed to remind and emphasize it over and over again. Deep in their bones, they were all people who relied on their bravery and strength. Moreover, the words organization and discipline had never been in their eyes or hearts. Who knew when an expert would rush into the enemy's main force and start a massacre due to a momentary surge of blood and chi? But if that happened, the exhaustion that would result was something that their side could not bear. The enemy could afford it because their foundations were strong, but their side definitely could not afford to be exhausted. In fact, the exhaustion of every single Saint Venerable could affect the final outcome of the battle. Even if a Saint Venerable on their side died after killing 20,000 of the enemy's people, it would still be a huge loss, because the enemy's Saint Venerable expert that he freed up could cause thousands of casualties on their side. Not to mention thousands, even hundreds of people would not be able to bear it. But on the side of the strange races, the casualties of tens of thousands of people was also insignificant. So they had to be cautious. And this kind of decision was undoubtedly a very cruel one, because if they were to act in this way, countless brothers and companions with lower cultivation would be killed in the battle with the enemy. They clearly had many powerful experts that could save them, but because of this cruel order, they could only watch helplessly as their comrades were killed. But this cruel and bloody order was also a correct decision. The evil monarch Manor, Tion Fa, and the Holy Lands were facing off against the strange race's army that outnumbered them by 1,000 times. If they only focused on eliminating the number of enemies, it would be akin to neglecting the essentials and seeking their own defeat. The correct way to deal with them was to first eliminate their high-end forces with all their might. Disregard the price, even if they had to perish together with the enemy. Eliminate all the top experts and leaders of the strange races. This was the key to destroying the strange races. Even if the remaining ordinary strange races entered the continent, they would be easily surrounded and killed. So this seemingly cruel decision was the prerequisite and basic condition to complete this plan. This kind of thing was very normal in a secular war. Just take a battle between two armies. Both sides would be watching from the sidelines. But before the battle ended, even if everyone died, no one would make the first move. Because the moment they made a move, the enemy might take the opportunity to attack their main army and cause the entire line to be routed. Although this was also a battlefield, the majority of the people participating in the battle were the people of the pugilistic world. The golden rule of the battlefield was nothing in the eyes of the people of the pugilistic world, but it was also this characteristic that created the greatest characteristic of the people of the pugilistic world, or perhaps their greatest weakness: hot-blooded and impulsive. It was understandable that you were hot-blooded and impulsive in the pugilistic world. But if you brought this kind of hot-blooded and impulsive to the battlefield, you would definitely be the target of beheading. You would either be surrounded and beheaded by the enemy or punished by military law. In that moment, the atmosphere in the tent was a little strange. The remaining forces of the three holy lands, the experts of the Heaven Saint Palace, the people of the evil monarch manor, the beast kings of the Tion-Fa forest, and the 9 serenities and 14 masters, all these people were gathered together, and the enmity between them was really difficult to resolve. No matter which one it was, there was a deep hatred that could not be resolved. But right now, everyone could sit together peacefully. There was only one goal, and that was to prepare for battle. Chapter 1198. The atmosphere here is not good. It's too stuffy. 9 serenities and 14 masters snorted and said, "This young master is going out for a stroll." Without waiting for anyone to speak, his body flashed and disappeared with a whoosh. Who the hell is this guy? He didn't even ask for leave before going out. He's really undisciplined. If my third uncle was in charge this time, he would definitely kill him. June Moxie frowned and grumbled. Everyone looked up at the sky and pretended not to hear. King expect 9 serenities and 14 masters to have some sort of organization and discipline. You might as well just guard the rooster and let it lay eggs more easily. For this guy to come here and not cause any more trouble, it was already giving the Allied forces a lot of face. It was very pleasing. Even if it was Jun Wui leading the army, would he be able to kill him? Don't joke around. What kind of knife can kill this guy? All right, everyone go back and prepare. Jun Moxie waved his hand and said, "I only have one request. The 3 holy lands must wait for the right time to attack. We will discuss this matter together. When the time comes, it will be very easy to send a message. All you need to do is to shout." Guhan nodded and did not say anything else. He stood up and led the people from the 3 holy lands out. Mo Wudao was the last to leave. When he was about to leave, he suddenly turned around and stared at Jun Moxie. "Manor Lord Jun, I have something to say," Mo Wudao said solemnly. "Speak," Jun Moxie said. Mo Wudao was not Guhan. With Jun Moxie's current strength, he did not put him in his eyes. As for the strategies and schemes that Mo Wudao was good at, they were not of much use in this battle. Jun Dashao really did not have the time to bother with him. But now that they were in an alliance, even if he did not want to bother with him, he still had to say a few words. "Back then, because of you, my only brother died. You and I are destined to be irreconcilable enemies." Mo Wudao's eyes turned into sharp lightning as he stared at Jun Moxie's face. His face revealed a heartfelt sorrow as he continued. "However, I am destined to never have the chance to take revenge in this lifetime. It's not just you. Even that villain Zhang Kuang, who destroyed the foundations of the 3 holy lands, will not have the chance to take revenge. Not only will I not have a chance, but I will also have to pray to the heavens from the bottom of my heart." The muscles on Mo Wudao's cheeks twitched in pain. He seemed to have used up all the strength in his body as he said bitterly, "I hope the heavens can bless you with a long life, because if you die, there will be no more hope for this continent." How ironic. However, the world is just so helpless. He piously prayed to the heavens, praying that his irreconcilable enemy could live a long and safe life. What did it feel like to do this? Perhaps Jun Moxie would never need to put Mo Wu Dao in his eyes. However, at this moment, Jun Moxie could clearly see Mo Wu Dao's pain. I will live on. I will live on for a long time. Jun Moxie's disdainful eyes regained their focus at this moment. At the same time, they became much gentler. No matter what, the fact that the other party had such thoughts was worthy of respect. It may be too late to say these words now. It will not help the situation at all. However, I still want to say it today. For some of the things that I've done in the past, I want to express my deepest apologies to the Venerable Mei and all the Shin beasts in the Tianfa forest. Mo Wu Dao laughed bitterly. He raised his head and said loudly, "Looking at this day, I admit that I was wrong. However, I do not regret it. If time could be reversed and I could do it all over again, as long as this old man didn't know that the situation would develop into such a serious situation, and I didn't know that the pillar of heaven's mountains would collapse, then this old man would still do those things. I do not regret it. I do not regret it," Mo Wu Dao said. "At this moment, you do not need to apologize to me anymore, because I will never forgive you, just like how you do not regret it. You do not regret it," Mei Shuyin said calmly. "As an old enemy and today's ally, the only thing I can do is to wish you good luck." Good luck would naturally lead to the Yellow Springs Road. Although Mei Shuyin did not say it clearly, Mo Wu Dao naturally knew it. There's one last thing. Mo Wu Dao straightened his body and looked straight into Jun Moxie's eyes. He said loudly, "I know that you are not satisfied with many things that the three holy lands have done. You have never had a good impression of us. You think that we are fishing for fame and are arrogant. But I still want to tell you that even though we have done many wrong things, even though we have hurt many people, we only have one original intention. That is to protect this continent and protect the people of the world. Even if we die, even if we are wrong, no one can take away the glory that the Holy Lands have held on to." After Mo Wu Dao finished speaking, his eyes lit up and he walked out proudly. Seeing him walk out, the eyes of everyone from the three Holy Lands shone brightly. Even if we die, even if we are wrong, no one can take away the glory that the Holy Lands have held onto for 10,000 years. Everyone suddenly felt that the faith that had disappeared in their hearts had once again surged back like the tides. Only when the people from the three Holy Lands had walked far away did Jun Moxie's voice, as if he was deep in thought, rang out from afar. "Although I still have some prejudice against the Holy Lands, although I have killed many of your people and have enmity with most of you, although you have done many wrong things, and it is destined that I will never forgive you, but right now, I express my apology for having doubted your intentions." Jun Moxie said solemnly, "I apologize." This apology of Jun Moxie was especially heavy and sincere. When they heard these three words, everyone from the three Holy Lands were moved. They truly did not dare to believe that the great evil monarch would actually apologize to others, and in such a serious manner at that. Just because of these three words, there were actually quite a number of people whose eyes were filled with hot tears. There were even a few people who choked a few times, feeling their vision blur. This was an apology from the evil monarch. Although this evil monarch had said more than once that he did not place the lives of the world in his eyes, and that the lives of the world had never been his responsibility. But at this moment, the one who could represent the lives of the world to say these words was only Jun Moxie. Only Jun Moxie. At this moment, these words that came from Jun Moxie had obtained the acknowledgement of the lives of the world. In the true sense, his words carried enormous weight. Mo Wu Dao suddenly turned around, and everyone stopped in their tracks. Turning around, they cupped their fists and bowed towards the tent. "I can die without regrets." This was the voice of everyone from the three Holy Lands. Although it was only 4 short words that came out of Mo Wu Dao's mouth, the complicated emotions contained within were something that even an ordinary person who had reincarnated 100 times might not be able to understand, much less experience. Then, the group of people turned around and strode away, never looking back. The wind whimpered in the air. After an hour, June Moxie sent over a few thousand simple paper bags. There was only one instruction or request. Put all your personal belongings, not too many or not too expensive, or just a piece of clothing or even a strand of hair, into this paper bag. Then, write your name on the paper bag, as well as a sentence that I wanted to say the most. June Moxie did not explain the use of this paper bag, but everyone from the 3 Holy Lands clearly knew the use of this paper bag and what it could contain. Everyone was given a paper bag. At this moment, these extremely simple paper bags could be bought with a single copper coin under normal circumstances. But in the eyes of the thousands of experts from the 3 Holy Lands, this was undoubtedly the most precious thing. It was the evidence that they had once existed, the proof that they had fought in this battle. Even their own lives were not as important as this paper bag. Therefore, everyone carefully received the paper bag in their hands, stuck it to their faces, and covered their chests. The entire camp of the Holy Lands was silent and solemn. At this moment, the battle in front of them had already reached its climax. Solitary Eagle's black robe had already turned into a bloody robe. There was a bloody knife wound on the right side of his face, and there was blood flowing from his head. As for his body, it was unknown how many wounds he had sustained on his chest, back, and thighs. But his tall and straight figure was still as swift as the wind, as proud as an eagle. At this moment, the long knife that Solitary Eagle originally held in his hand had already disappeared. It had been replaced with a special knife that was used by the strange races. After countless slashes, that high-quality long knife that could be said to be a divine weapon had already been turned into dust. As for the knife in his hand, it was already the 6th weapon that he had snatched. Even this knife had already turned into a sawtooth shape, and it might not be able to last much longer. With a low roar, Solitary Eagle's body suddenly shot forward. His left hand was like a hook, and with a series of soft pu-pu-pu sounds, more than 10 heads were crushed by his beautiful eagle claws. At the same time, the knife in his right hand also slashed through the throats of 13 strange races soldiers. The blood that spurted out was exceptionally beautiful, and it was the most beautiful light in the dark night. This was the final bloom of a life that had fallen. There was a sudden fluctuation in the air beside him, and a black figure suddenly appeared beside Solitary Eagle. Before the figure had fully appeared, the sharp knife had already pierced towards his back. Solitary Eagle's body twisted strangely, as if he had grown eyes on the back of his head. Without even turning his head, he clamped the knife that should have pierced through his back under his armpit. Then, he quickly retreated, the knife in his right hand accurately slashing through the throats of a strange race man and woman beside him. At the same time, his right elbow smashed into the throat of the frenzy blade enduring earth behind him. With a flick of his wrist, the knife flashed, and the other head of the frenzy blade enduring earth fell to the ground with a pu sound. A sure hit, a sure kill. Chapter 1199. After such a long battle, the Solitary Eagle's stamina had dropped, and he had suffered quite a number of injuries. But those frenzy blade enduring earths were not having it easy either. Through a series of exchanges, they could clearly feel that this small troop of 300 people in front of them, although they weren't Tian Fa Xian beasts, but ordinary human Xian cultivators, whether it was their physique or Xian cultivation, they were all ridiculously strong. Not only were they not inferior to the Tian Fa Xian beasts, they were even stronger. Not to mention that the weakest of them was at the 3rd level of the Holy Emperor. Their brute strength was also shocking. As long as they were hit head-on, even hell-enduring ghost experts would be sent flying 5 to 6 zhang away. They would even have to knock down a large number of their own people. If there was no one to stop them, some people were even worried that this punch would send the person flying back to his home. Under such a powerful punch, if the person's cultivation was slightly lower, the hearts of both bodies would explode. Among the warriors of Tian Fa, only the warriors of the bear tribe could possess such terrifying strength. And not every warrior of the bear tribe had this level of strength. But this small army of 300 people actually had such strength. This was a little too terrifying. From the start of the battle, the strange races who had the absolute advantage in numbers, did not put this small group of people in their eyes at all. Most of the Frenzy Blade Enduring Earths did not move out either, because they already knew that the ones behind these people were the most terrifying Tion Fa warriors. They needed to conserve their strength to deal with those terrifying Tion Fa beast warriors. As for these ordinary humans before them, there was no need for experts to deal with them. Just a spit from one of them would be enough to drown them. Even if their strength was not weak, they could still deal with them with numbers. But as soon as the two sides clashed, the experts on the side of the outsiders realized that all their previous thoughts and strategies were completely wrong. Any one of these 300 people would be a perfect battle fortress. They were like natural killing machines, fighting fiercely in the midst of thousands of soldiers and horses. There was not a single person who could withstand a single blow from them. It wasn't that the fighting strength of the non-humankind warriors was too weak, but that these people were too strong, ridiculously strong. If 100 rats disregarded all costs and casualties, they might be able to kill a cat, but 100 ants would definitely not be able to defeat a tiger. Ordinary non-humankind warriors didn't even have the ability to attack them, let alone kill them. They couldn't even slow them down for a second. Before they were completely exhausted, the human wave tactic was just a joke to these warriors. An extremely cruel and bloodthirsty joke. All of their gazes were ice cold, as if they were looking at a living person, as if they were no different from a corpse. They didn't even blink when dozens and hundreds of lives were sacrificed under their hands. In the depths of his deep eyes, there was only excitement and satisfaction of killing intent. 300 people against an army of tens of thousands. What kind of imbalance was this? It was a huge disparity of 1 against 100. However, when these 300 people pounced forward, they easily tore open a bloody hole in the tight formation that the strange races had meticulously set up in the dark of the night. Especially the blades that they used at the beginning, a single slash was like a bolt of lightning. Under their blades, the weapons of the strange races were as fragile as tofu, unable to withstand a single blow. The moment the weapons of both sides came into contact with each other, a light cha sound was heard. Their own weapons had already been broken into two. As the upper half of the blade flew out, 2 parts of the upper body of the strange race's people also flew out, their eyes wide with disbelief. Caught off guard. This was the only word that could accurately describe it. In a battle between 2 armies, there was actually such a thing as being caught off guard. If word of this got out, no matter which country's soldiers, they would probably laugh their heads off. But right now, at this moment, this unimaginable scene was actually happening in the formation of the strange races. As soon as the 2 sides clashed, the warriors of the foreign races, who were a dozen or so rows at the front, didn't even have time to react before they discovered that their comrades in front of them, who were still alive just a moment ago, had all fallen, and the sharp blades that took the lives of their comrades were already right in front of their throats. So fast, so incisive. There were a total of 300 Heaven Destroyer and Spirit Devourer soldiers. They were like diligent farmers holding their sickles and entering a field of ripe wheat. And it was a super huge harvest. Everyone waved their blades excitedly, as if they didn't know fatigue at all. There was only the joy of harvesting. By the time the blades in the hands of these 300 people could no longer bear the slashing and finally broke, they had already reaped over 10,000 lives. Don't forget, this was the strange races. Every single one of them had 2 bodies. If it was purely calculated by the number of people, the 10,000 lives here had to be multiplied by 2 to be the correct answer. The Heaven Destroyer and Spirit Devourer warriors still maintained their cold attitude as they continued to advance. Even in such an intense battle, the entire troops formation was still orderly and orderly. While his hands were rapidly reaping the lives of his enemies, his feet still maintained a steady pace as he pushed forward. Occasionally, he would whip out a leg, and the body that was sent flying would smash down a large portion of the enemies in front of him. Then, he would indifferently step by step over them. Occasionally, he would step on someone's stomach, as if he was stepping on a hydrogen balloon. Just like that, dripping with blood and stepping on countless broken limbs. The warriors of the Heaven Destroyer and Spirit Devourer continued to push forward coldly. These people were originally the iron-blooded soldiers that had followed Jun Wui in the past. Towards war, towards slaughter, towards death, they were already used to it. After receiving Jun Moxie's hellish training, their hearts were even more resolute. Continuous extermination of bandits, continuous slaughter, they had not stopped for a single moment in this 1.5 years. Especially when they were facing the strange races, perverted bastards that could never coexist with the humans of the Xian continent. They were even more merciless killers. Under the leadership of the 2 Death God-level captains, this battle had directly turned into a competition of slaughter. That's right, it was a competition of slaughter. Along the path that this army of 300 had passed through, there were only countless corpses behind them. There wasn't even a single one that was half dead. Kill in one strike, kill in one strike. The killing techniques of this evil monarch, Jun Moxie, were always simple, accurate, incisive, and direct. Once they made their move, there was no chance of luck. Not a single fish had escaped the net. This kind of 300 people in this kind of battlefield where they were outnumbered was like a dragon returning to the sea or a tiger returning to the mountains. The commander of the strange races this time was Quanyang Gosheng. Other than being a frenzy blade enduring earth expert, he was also an outstanding commander. The number of people under his command numbered more than 50,000. It was his judgment that had gathered all the hell-enduring ghosts, especially the frenzy blade enduring earths, in one place. Other than the captain and vice-captain, all the elites were gathered together, awaiting orders to attack at any time. They were only waiting for the crucial moment to break through the enemy's defenses and achieve great merits. As for the ordinary soldiers under him, although there were 50,000 of them, they were just cannon fodder. He believed that as long as he could win this battle beautifully, even if these 50,000 soldiers all died, he would be able to quickly replenish them. Thus, he did not care about the sacrifices, especially the sacrifices of his ordinary tribesmen. Chapter 1200. As the long blade in the hands of the Heaven Destroyer warrior was the first to shatter into pieces, followed by a few other warriors. The scene of weapons shattering gradually appeared, becoming more and more frequent. Even if it was a weapon that had reached the level of a divine weapon, it still couldn't withstand countless full-force slashes and collisions. This general has finally discovered their weakness. That is, their weapons are not good enough. General Quanyang slapped his thigh with an excited look. However, this sentence was met with a look of disdain from the group of experts at the side. His weapon was no good. Such a weapon is still not enough. Didn't you see that our weapons couldn't even withstand 2 blows from his saber? The shattered blades in the hands of these Xian human warriors have been exchanged for at least tens or even hundreds of times the price. In other words, at the very least, we have to exchange dozens of our sabers for 1 broken saber. Furthermore, there were also many hell enduring ghosts and frenzy blade enduring earth's frenzy blade enduring earth. Only then did they obtain such an exchange. Even in the entire divine sun race, there weren't many of such divine weapons. But now, the general actually said, I've finally discovered their weakness, and that is that their weapons aren't good. Excuse me, if you still want their weapons, how can you? Don't tell me you'll only admit that the other party's saber is good when he pierces all of us with a saber? Fortunately, it was not possible. If it was possible, he would have killed all 50,000 people in front of him. As the commander of an army, General Quanyang naturally wouldn't be so brainless. At this moment, he also realized his slip of the tongue. The female body's face turned red, but the male body's expression didn't change. And this was sufficient proof that men's skin was just a little thicker than women's skin. And what I meant just now was that their weapons can't hold on any longer and they're finally finished. Next, it's our turn to show our might, General Quanyang explained. Although everyone knew what was going on, he was a commander, so they had to give him some face. Besides, Didn't he make up for it perfectly? But the next moment, following a series of gasps, General Chuanyang's eyes widened once again. They saw with their own eyes that a human warrior whose saber had been shattered directly reached out to grab the sharp saber that was slashing towards him. Completely disregarding the fact that he was holding the saber with his bare hands, he exerted force to snatch the saber away. Then, he gave that strange race warrior a backhand slap on his face. The strength of this slap was rather great. Directly, the male half of the strange race warrior's body was slapped so hard that it danced wildly in the air like a windmill. Then, the two halves were twisted into a shape. Even so, the male half of the male body of the strange of the other half was twisted into pieces. Then, the two halves flew into the air. This sudden change happened too quickly. The other half of his female body only reacted at this moment. She let out an inhuman scream and turned around to look at the bloody mess behind her. Only then did she realize that her partner and brother had disappeared without a trace. She screamed again and fell to the ground, dead. As for the Heaven Destroyer warrior, he didn't even bother to look at them. At this moment, he had already used the blade of the outsider warrior that he had just slapped to advance a dozen steps. It was as if he had already made up his mind and was 10,000% sure that the alien that he had slapped would not be able to live. Don't doubt it. This is scientifically proven. It was the same backhand slap that turned an ordinary, strong black bear into a whirlwind and sent it flying for half a mile. When the hunter found the body of the unlucky black bear, he pulled it back and found that the inside of the black bear's head had already become a piece of tofu. General Chuanyang sucked in air as if he had a toothache. His mouth and eyes slanted as he said, "We've been fighting with all our might for an hour, and this fellow's casual slap still has such strength? Did he use some kind of secret technique? Or is it the final radiance of the setting sun before he breathes his last?" Everyone was speechless, their eyes twitching. None of them were optimistic about this conclusion. They had never heard of such a secret technique before. As for the final radiance of the setting sun and breathes his last, that was even more of a joke. Didn't you see that the other side was full of energy and vigor? And the situation of the battle continued to develop in a direction that was disadvantageous to the strange races. Because with a loud roar, the Tiger King, Earthcracker, had charged into the battlefield with his own brothers. Right now, the Tiger King was truly a little depressed. He had charged forward with all his might, and only after charging for such a long time did he finally reach the enemy. Mother Kerr, what kind of people are these? Why are they so clean? Stepping on the sticky corpses of the enemies on the ground, he charged forward for 2 to 3 miles. Beneath his feet were human heads rolling like watermelons before he finally came into contact with the enemy. Mother Kerr, I clearly saw from afar that this place was filled with living people just now. Why are they all dead now? Isn't this killing speed a little too fast? His 3,000 brothers had not even killed a single enemy, and they were all covered in blood. But this was not the main point. The Tiger King waved his hand. F***CK. There's almost no more left. Brothers, hurry up and snatch. Snatch. The word snatch could be used to kill enemies on the battlefield. Usually, it was a situation where thousands of people were fighting against hundreds of people, and one side had the absolute advantage in numbers. But the Tiger King had a kind of fear at this moment. Mother Kerr, I came to support, but in the end, I became leftovers. If I lost the bet and learned to bark like a dog, how would I be able to raise my head? This kind of feeling would definitely not be good. In fact, the Tiger King already had a very bad feeling. If I don't act quickly, I might not even be able to eat leftovers. Looking at the behavior of this group of murderers, it was as if they were fighting to enter the bridal chamber, killing so quickly, a typical case of wanting to eat meat and drink soup. This made the Tiger King, Earthcracker, feel a little defeated. Looking at the speed at which this group of people killed, Earthcracker was really a little surprised. Is this the Heaven Destroyer and Spirit Devourer that usually speak to me so politely? F***CK. I was fooled by their friendly appearance. I thought that this group of people were all gentle and weak, but from the looks of it now, I was completely wrong. No wonder they dared to be so arrogant just now. They really have the capital. Their level of savagery is even higher than us Xian beasts. If we were to compare with them, it would be impossible for us to catch up. Looking at his troops rapidly disappearing like snowflakes under the blazing sun, General Kuan finally could not sit still anymore. Divine Sun, Divine Sun, I was still hoping to use these troops to break through the enemy's defensive line and directly charge into the enemy's main camp. To think that more than a third of them have already died. How could this be? Let me explain. The phrase Divine Sun is the catchphrase of all the strange races. It's equivalent to what we call, oh my God. And that's it. Because they are the Divine Sun race. I will translate it for everyone. This explanation doesn't count. I will add another 200 words. General Kuan clearly realized that he definitely could not wait any longer. If he waited any longer, he and these experts around him would be the only ones left. Everyone would become a commander without an army. General Kuan Goshing's eyes were completely bloodshot as he pointed with his long saber. Attack. Target. Kill those 300 Xian humans first. At all costs. After saying that, General Kuan suddenly froze, as if he felt that there was something wrong with his words after thinking for a long time. He finally understood. I said 300 people just now. That's right, Divine Sun, Divine Sun. General Kuan finally understood what was wrong. From the start of the battle, not a single one of the 300 people had fallen. There were no casualties at all. That meant to say that at least 15,000 people had died on his side, while the other side had not lost a single person. How could this be possible? The moment he thought of this point, General Kuan actually scared himself into being dumbfounded. Following General Chuanyang's command, the 1,500 experts gathered around him, whether it was Hell enduring ghosts or Frenzy Blade enduring earths, were all cursing General Chuanyang's 8 generations of ancestors in their hearts. Divine Sun, this was the collective thought of all 1,500 people. Aren't you just sending us to our deaths? With such a powerful army, it would already be a miracle if 5 or 6 of us could kill even one of them. If we really killed all 300 of them, not a single one of our 1,500 people would be able to return. Even if we were all killed, the other side would still have a few dozen of them alive and kicking. If we must face them, we'd rather deal with the Tiger Tribe and devour those Tian Fa ferocious beasts. That way, our chances of survival would be slightly higher, but the general had already given the order. Everyone could only obey. 1,500 experts officially entered the battlefield. After they joined the battle, the results were undoubtedly very obvious. At the very least, the Heaven Destroyer and Spirit Devourer armies' ferocious attacks were suddenly stopped for a moment. He was no longer as imposing and unstoppable as he was just now. But it was only for a moment. General Kuan Goshing clenched his fists tightly as he watched the battle from a high vantage point. As the highest commander of an army of 50,000, the first thing he had to do was to control the overall situation and not personally join the battle. Although he was also a Frenzy Blade enduring earth, and an elite superior ninja at that, General Kuan Goshing only felt extremely nervous in his heart. He did not let go of his nervousness just because the 1,500 experts of the strange races had joined the battle. In fact, he even had a vague feeling that this final trump card might not be effective. He watched the battle anxiously and waved his hand, giving out a series of orders. The flag bearers beside him waved their flags left and right, sending out a series of signals. The troops on the battlefield instantly weaved in from left to right, coordinating closely with each other as they retreated the frontmost troops and replaced them with fresh troops. There were also 4 to 5 troops that immediately launched attacks against the Heaven Destroyer and Spirit Devourer army. Even if it couldn't achieve the ideal effect, it should at least have some effect. Chapter 1201. And in the dark of the night, this black figure also looked like a strange race with 2 conjoined bodies. So, in the rear of this strange race army, no one noticed it. Moreover, everyone's attention was already fixed on the battle ahead. Their eyes were wide open, not even daring to breathe loudly. All of them felt their palms turn cold and wet with cold sweat. Who would be stupid enough to pay attention to what was happening in their own army camp? So this black figure seemed to be moving very slowly under the cover of the rocks, trees, and countless bodies. But if one looked closely, they would realize that his speed was actually very fast. One moment, he was still next to a strange race person, and the next moment, he was already several dozen zhang away from that person. That black figure was getting closer and closer to the small hill where Kuanyang Gosheng was. General Kuanyang was still concentrating on watching the development of the situation on the battlefield from afar, carefully analyzing what kind of adjustments should he make to completely restrain the enemy's attack, so as to completely kill them. This kind of thinking, if he had not personally led his troops to fight against such a terrifying team that directly defied common sense, if he knew that someone was using 50,000 men to fight against a small team of 300 and still had to worry about how to restrain the enemy's attack, he would definitely laugh his head off, thinking that the commander of this team was an idiot. But now, all he could feel was helplessness, a heartfelt helplessness. He couldn't help but turn back to look at the dark rear behind him. After Sasho Kitajima was sure that the enemy would not fall for it, he had already silently returned to the rear. So, this battle became the first battle to test the enemy's strength. Using 50,000 men to test out the enemy's strength. If they succeeded in this battle, it would naturally be a happy ending. Even if they failed, they would be able to see the enemy's overall strength and fighting strength. And most importantly, all the strange races were very confident that even if they could not successfully break through the enemy's defense line, their own troops would not suffer too many casualties. At least they would not be like that fool Shanchuan Poku, who lost almost 200,000 men in less than 6 hours of battle. This time, it was an organized and disciplined army with extremely strict military discipline. It was definitely not that motley crew from the previous time. This was something that General Kuanyang Gosheng firmly believed and was filled with confidence before this. But now, the cruel reality had completely shattered his fantasy. No exaggeration, the battle was not over yet, but the number of casualties was already too exaggerated. It had already reached an unbearable level. Then, when he turned back, General Kuanyang felt a sharp pain in his heart. He saw with his own eyes that the dozens of frenzy blade enduring earths had all vanished into thin air after activating the most mysterious and lethal stealth technique of the alien race. In the direction where they disappeared, there were more than 100 people fiercely attacking under the leadership of a white-clothed man whose entire body was as white as snow. General Kuanyang was filled with boundless anticipation, hoping that these dozens of frenzy blade enduring earths would succeed in one fell swoop and take down all these people. If that was the case, they could basically declare the annihilation of this army. However, in the blink of an eye, they saw from afar that the leader of the group in white seemed to have a sinister smile on his face. That's right, it was a sinister smile. Suddenly, he let out an earth-shattering roar. It's almost time. Kill. What do you mean by it's about time to kill? Just as General Kuanyang was pondering over this question, he saw a scene that made his heart tremble. This was the answer. Those 100 over-detestable executioners suddenly flung out the broken long blades in their hands at the same time. With a fanatical blade light, it was as if countless bolts of lightning had suddenly appeared in the night sky, and all the bolts of lightning were aimed at the empty space in front of them. These blades were split into 3 waves, covering a radius of 500 zhang in front of them, turning this area into a land of death. A series of heart-wrenching screams suddenly rang out from the empty space. The 30 to 40 hell-enduring ghosts and 20 to 30 frenzy blade enduring earths that had just charged forward let out the shrill cries of death at the same time. Their bodies suddenly appeared in the empty space, each of them with over 10 penetrating wounds on their bodies. Many of them were directly cut into 7 or 8 pieces, falling to the ground like broken gunny sacks. It was as neat as dumplings being dropped into a pot. Divine Sun! General Kuanyang Gosheng suddenly grabbed his hair using so much strength that he almost pulled his scalp off. His eyes were filled with pain and disbelief. What was going on? How did they discover the exact location of the frenzy blade enduring Earths? To actually be able to launch such a targeted counterattack? This was something that should not have happened, but it had actually happened right in front of General Kuan Yang. How could he have known that the two leaders of the Heaven Destroyer and Spirit Devourer were two Saint Venerables? Especially Feng Wanyan. No matter what the situation was, he would always maintain his absolute calm. In the midst of a huge battle, he was still very observant and alert. Under his hands, 7 to 8 hell-enduring ghosts and frenzy blade-enduring earths had already died. And Feng Wanyan had already calculated the characteristics of the strange race's invisibility from the time they set off, to the time they were hidden, and from the time they were hidden to the time they arrived at the enemy's side. He had already calculated it to be about 80 to 90% accurate. He had long noticed the group of experts under the strange race's general, and he had also deduced that at the crucial moment, these people would definitely make a move and turn the tide of the battle. Feng Wanyan had finally waited for it. So when these people stood up and rushed over, he had already realized that a huge gift was about to land in his pocket. So at that time, he had already instructed everyone to make the preparations. The moment the order was given, they had indeed reaped an unprecedented harvest. All the invisible enemies were completely annihilated in a single exchange. This was indeed a battle with the lowest price they had to pay. But General Kuan Yang did not know about this. Seeing so many experts being annihilated in a single exchange, and not even a single hair on the enemy's body, General Kuan Yang felt that he was about to break down. So General Kuan Yang immediately broke down. It wasn't that General Kuan Yang was weak, but someone had helped him. In the midst of his extreme shock, General Kuan Yang suddenly felt a strange ripple in the air in front of him. A strange race's warrior suddenly appeared in front of him. From his appearance, he looked just like a child. General Kuan Yang was bewildered for a moment. Is there such a small soldier in my army? But the next moment his eyes widened, because the two bodies of this small soldier had suddenly separated from each other. It seemed like they had become two people from the mainland, two children from the mainland. General Chuanyang's eyes instantly popped out, but it was already too late for him to react. He only felt a chill in his chest. A narrow, long sword had already accurately pierced into the vital spot of his heart. On the other side, a similarly narrow sword had also accurately pierced into the other side's heart. Kuan Yang Goshing only had time to let out a final scream. Even now, he still could not believe that the other party could actually successfully assassinate him despite being surrounded by 50,000 soldiers. The next moment, the two swords were pulled out from his body at the same time. With a casual wave of his hand, General Chuanyang's two heads flew up from his neck. The heads were already in the air, but General Kuan Yang was still in his final thoughts. Why do I keep feeling that there's something wrong with the way these two people attacked? Just as his consciousness was about to fade away, General Kuan Yang suddenly felt a sense of relief, because he finally realized what was wrong. Because these two assassins did not use their right hands to kill him. All the attacks had come from their left hands from start. One fatal blow. One fatal blow. As a frenzy blade enduring earths, General Kuan Yang Goshing did not even have the slightest time to react. No wonder I felt that something was wrong. No wonder it felt so awkward. So I was killed by two left-handers. What a coincidence. Two left-handers just so coincidentally came together to kill me. Oh, right? They don't have right hands. General Chuanyang's consciousness completely disappeared. At this moment, the military officers beside him realized the huge change and screamed. But they only felt a chill in their throats and no longer had any thoughts. These two kids, who looked to be at most 13 or 14 years old, still had a cold expression on their faces after they succeeded. Their eyes did not even move as they slaughtered the 17 to 18 military officers and their personal guards on the slope like they were cutting vegetables. Then, the two of them, one to the left and one to the right, flashed past like lightning, killing the 12 flag bearers and the 12 bugle bearers at the same time. The temporary headquarters of the strange races finally fell into complete chaos. But by the time the experts rushed over to provide reinforcements, there was only a ground of corpses. Those two little figures had already disappeared like ghosts. Looking at the ground littered with corpses, everyone was dumbfounded. What kind of assassins were these? Surrounded by 50,000 soldiers on this battlefield filled with battle cries, they calmly killed the commander of the army and even wiped out all the generals in the command center. And they even had the time to kill the 12 bugle bearers and 12 flag bearers in the command center. Finally, they swaggered off, and they left without a sound. It was as if they had completely disappeared without a trace in the blink of an eye. They were humans after all. How could they move so freely among the divine sun tribesmen who were all conjoined heads without being discovered? Could it be that these two assassins also know the stealth kill technique of our divine sun race? This is really the divine sun, ah? When all the surrounding soldiers regained their senses, they looked at the ground of corpses behind them and broke out in cold sweat. These generals were at least hell-enduring ghosts, but under the hands of these two assassins, they didn't even have the chance to conceal themselves before they were all killed. Immediately, an extreme fear surged in everyone's hearts. Everyone felt a chill on their necks, as if those two deadly narrow swords were wandering around their necks at this very moment. Tion, Can, DK. These two super assassins personally groomed by Jun Moxie in this battle, under the encirclement of thousands of soldiers, revealed their unparalleled sharpness for the first time. No one knew that this battle was also the battle of the virginity of these two young assassins. This was the first true assassination. A battle that chilled the enemy's courage. A battle that shocked even the gods and ghosts. Recommending my good friend Poison Chrysanthemum urban novel, The Strongest Teacher. This is a poisonous chrysanthemum. Actually, I'm a pure and innocent person. I didn't know what chrysanthemums meant and didn't know that chrysanthemums could be poisonous. I don't know what I smeared on them or ate them. Chapter 1202. The assassins from the evil monarch manor that appear behind the outsiders were not just these two kids. Two people who could definitely be ranked in the top 3 of the strongest assassins in the world were also here. These two assassins were naturally Bailey Luo Yun and Lung Ao. Among the combat forces belonging to the evil monarch manor, other than Solitary Eagle and Feng Wan Yun, these two had the most stable foundations and the highest talent. Their level of hard work was also not inferior to any other members of the evil monarch manor. Naturally, their achievements could be imagined. And because of this sudden battle, with the help of the elixirs given by Jun Moxie, they had successfully climbed to the level of a 3rd-level Saint Venerable. With such strength to carry out an assassination, apart from a very limited number of people, no one in the world could escape from any one of them. Even with the cultivation of the dead Xiaochang Tian, a peak expert who had reached the Saint Monarch realm, if he was ambushed by the two of them at the same time, the chances of him surviving would not be more than 50%. The reason why the two of them came here was because they were more worried about the two kids' actions this time. They were waiting in the dark, prepared to forcefully charge in and rescue the two kids the moment things went wrong. After all, the target this time was the commander of the outsider side. They would definitely not be easy to deal with. But the process and result of this mission caused these two top assassins to widen their eyes and mouths. In the blink of an eye, those two little fellows had actually completed this top-notch assassination mission perfectly and almost flawlessly. Not only had they completed it perfectly, they had even exceeded their expectations. They had directly wiped out the enemy's rear headquarters in this battle. After that, they had even disappeared without a trace in the shortest amount of time, not leaving any traces behind. This was enough to make any brilliant assassin in the world sigh in admiration. After sighing in admiration, Bailey Luo Yun's eyes shot out a look of shock. He turned and asked Lung Ao, "Did you see clearly where the two of them are hiding now?" Lung Ao shook his head gloomily. "I really didn't see clearly. With these two kids' current achievements, they definitely have the ability to protect themselves. This is an indisputable fact. There is no need to doubt it. Bailey Luo Yun also nodded and said, "Even we can't detect all of their tracks. I believe that there are existences in this world that can detect their tracks. Even if there's still some, there won't be too many of them." The two assassins looked at each other again and saw the frustration and surprise in each other's eyes. Compared to Tion, Kan, and DK, the two of them could be said to be the ancestors of assassins. Yet, they had not discovered where the two of them had gone. This was simply inconceivable. The two assassins sighed helplessly and quietly disappeared into the night. Or perhaps it wouldn't be long before there would be some changes in the top 3 rankings of the world's strongest assassins. The commander had been killed. After receiving this bad news, the 50,000-strong army of the strange races immediately fell into a terrible situation without a leader. It was at this moment that the glorious effect of decapitation in the era of cold weapons was displayed. The main force of the non-human kind was still moving according to the orders they had received. After fighting like this for quite a while, many military officers turned back from time to time, feeling even more puzzled. The battle situation was clearly disadvantageous. So why didn't Lord Kuan Yang give the order to change the formation? But at most, they could only mutter in their hearts. They didn't dare to put their thoughts into action, because the battlefield was a whole. If one of the troops hastily adopted a new tactic and the other troops didn't know about it, the result would be that they couldn't cooperate with each other. It would definitely cause more chaos, and their own people could mess up their own formation, and among the non-human kind, the division of ranks was even stricter. The stronger ones could casually kill the weaker ones who didn't obey them. Even if there was a mistake in the orders given by the higher-ups, the subordinates still had to carry it out loyally. If they disobeyed, even if they won, it would be a huge mistake, and they would easily attract the killing intent of the higher-ups. On the other hand, even if they lost the battle, the responsibility would only be on the higher-ups. So, although they recognized the awkward situation before them, they could only defend the situation and try their best to hold on, hoping that they could last until the moment when their enemies were completely exhausted. But they were destined to be disappointed. After such a long and intense battle, not only did the 300 Heaven Destroyer and Spirit Devourer troops not show any signs of exhaustion, they even became even more ferocious. In fact, the originally scattered and separated parts had even gathered together once again, especially with the two leaders, Solitary Eagle and Feng Wanyun, leading the charge. The two Saint Venerables were invincible existences on this battlefield. Very quickly, the Heaven Destroyer and Spirit Devourer troops that had already fallen into a state of fighting on their own were gathered together once again. Like a snowball, it became bigger and bigger, finally turning into 2 whistling hurricanes. They continued to roll forward. As for Earthcracker and his 3,000 fierce tigers, they were like a raging flood dragon in the middle. At the same time, a total of 2,400 people formed 24 small troops, also charged in from 24 directions. Along the way, blood splattered everywhere. These 24 small troops had never imagined that this operation would be so easy. The enemy's resistance was actually so weak, and the other party didn't even have any effective resistance. The most direct feeling was that the situation in front of them was not a battle between two armies, but a well-trained army against a group of complete and utter mobs. Even though there was a huge difference in the number of people on both sides, it was still a one-sided massacre. When a group of tigers faced a flock of sheep that outnumbered them by 100 times, would the tigers be afraid? The answer was a definite no. The tigers would not hesitate to devour the sheep. Even if the sheep wanted to resist, they would be powerless and could only struggle in vain. The 24 small troops weaved in and out. The Heaven Destroyer and Spirit Devourer troops charged forward, and the 3,000 Tiger Tribe soldiers were also in the center. With this as the starting point, they spread out in all directions. This frontline battle between two continents with such a huge disparity in numbers had actually turned into a one-sided massacre. But it was precisely in this chaotic situation that the strange race's army, which had been reduced from 50,000 to only 20,000, still fought to the death without retreating. As the battle escalated, the eyes of all the outsiders turned bloodshot. They raised their long blades and charged forward like fiends. Even though they knew that charging forward meant death, they still stepped on the corpses of their comrades and charged forward fearlessly. Batch after batch, one after another, without end. From start to end, not a single person retreated. In the dark skies of the north, Jun Moxie's expression grew lang-lang as he stood in the air, watching the battle with his hands behind his back. Although the night was long, it was still gradually passing by amidst the flashes of blades and shadows of swords, blood, moonlight, and stars. Jun Moxie's white robes fluttered gently in the air, his hair fluttering in the wind. His two sharp eyes seemed to pierce through the layers of darkness, taking in the entire battle situation. At this moment, the entire situation of this frontline battle was already within their grasp. The only thing they had to worry about now was the strange race's final wave of desperate counterattacks. In other words, when the strange races knew that they were in a desperate situation, knowing that they could not avoid death, they would use the final battle tactic, collective charge, or an individual self-detonation to launch a desperate counterattack. If his troops were to be injured in the end, Jun Moxie believed that with just these strange race's troops, other than self-detonation, there was no other way to deal with them. It did not exist at all. All of a sudden, Jun Moxie seemed to have sensed something. Raising his head, a pair of sharp eyes pierced through the battlefield, piercing through the night sky. It was as if two shooting stars had suddenly appeared in the night sky, landing right at the back of the outsider's army. At this moment, Jun Moxie's cold eyes were even sharper, as if an ancient demon had raised two heavenly swords and appeared in the dense night sky. In the distance where he was looking, there were also clothes fluttering in the night sky. Sasho Kitajima and a dozen other strange races experts also stood in the void, watching this tragic battle with rapt attention. Looking at the situation, they seemed to have just arrived. All of a sudden, Jun Moxie's cold gaze pierced through the night sky and arrived before them. Sasho Kitajima's heart immediately sensed it, and he clearly felt an inexplicable chill run down his spine. He could not help but look up. There were a total of 4 gazes from 2 great experts in the world, meeting in midair, intertwining fiercely. The invisible and intangible gazes actually burst forth with extremely bright electric light. This different kind of confrontation between the gazes, the light that was emitted from the contact, actually transformed into a tangible color. Almost everyone on the battlefield who was fighting instantly sensed this shocking change. Although most of them could not see what exactly happened, they still felt a clear and domineering feeling, as if the 9 heavens' thunder was about to fall. At the moment when the 2 gazes met, Sasho Kitajima felt an indescribable piercing pain in his eyes, and his mind actually produced a subtle feeling that was close to being lost. His back immediately broke out in cold sweat. Following that, he suddenly turned his head, this time with such force that his neck bones let out a kacha sound, and only then did he finally get rid of the entanglement from Jun Moxie's gaze. At this moment, Sasho Kitajima only felt as if his head had been ruthlessly hit by a stick, and this kind of pain even penetrated deep into his brain. His brain juice all over his head had turned into paste under this blow, and he was actually in a daze. Sasho Kitajima once again shook his head forcefully, and only then did he barely recover. Even so, he still felt a little dizzy, and there was a strong, nauseating feeling in his throat that made him want to vomit. He could not help but be shocked. This exchange of gazes could be said to be a pure confrontation on the spiritual level. However, the dignified number 1 expert of the strange races, Sasho Kitajima, was actually at a complete disadvantage in this exchange of gazes. Facing Jun Moxie's thunderous gaze, He actually did not have any strength to retaliate. At this moment, the distance between the two of them was more than 50 li across the entire battlefield. However, even at such a distance, Sasho Kitajima was still injured by Jun Moxie's gaze. Chapter 1203. Lord Chuangshang, what's wrong with you? Did something happen? A strange race man with a face full of beard like a chimpanzee looked at Sasho Kitajima with concern. Oh, sun god above, the other party actually has such a powerful, unparalleled expert. Only now did Chuangshang Beidao get rid of that suffocating feeling in his chest. He said in a solemn voice, "Unparalleled expert? Are you referring to the level of that old fellow Guhan? Even if the other party is an expert, he can't be stronger than Lord Chuangshang, right? Even a number one expert of the Xian continent, Guhan, may not be a match for Lord Chuangshang, right?" That person asked curiously with a hint of ridicule. The person who spoke was surnamed Gao Qiao, and his name was Gao Qiao Tuku. He was a level 3 Saint Venerable expert and a level 2 Supremacy Enduring Heavens. He was just one step away from becoming a level 4 Saint Venerable. This person had always regarded Sasho Kitajima as his idol. In his heart, Sasho Kitajima was an invincible existence. So when he asked this question, his accent was also very relaxed. Number one expert? Guhan is no longer the number one expert of the Xian continent. At least, Guhan is not a match for that person just now, because I'm also not a match for him. When Sasho Kitajima said this, both sides of his face were as black as charcoal. Nanny. Gao Qiao Tuku was completely dumbfounded. His mouth widened like a shocked hippopotamus. As for this scream, it came from his female body. But the voice was also like a broken gong, without any sense of beauty. Nanny was the same as Baka. They were both the language of the strange races. The former meant what, while the latter meant idiot or bastard. It was probably the most commonly used curse word of the strange races. There's actually such a person in this world. Then where is he? The other 10 people also asked in shock. Even the number one expert of the strange races, Sasho Kitajima, had to admit that he was no match for him. It could be seen that this person's strength had obviously reached an unimaginable level. That person is in the direction I was looking at just now, about 50 li away. Just now I met his gaze. Sasho Kitajima's expression was unusually grave. Even now, he still did not dare to look in that direction. That piercing pain had left a deep impression on him, as if his very soul had been injured. This result had caused him to completely lose the will to fight. But Sasho Kitajima could still clearly feel that. While that person was fighting, Sasho Kitajima could clearly sense that he was still standing proudly on the same spot. Even though there was such a great distance, he was looking at him with a feeling of disdain. His gaze was cold, sharp, and awe-inspiring. The moment they heard Chuangshang Beidao's explanation, they all focused their vision and looked in the direction that Chuangshang Beidao had been looking at earlier. Sasho Kitajima was shocked. If even he was no match for that person, if the others were to engage in a mental battle with him, the consequences would be dire. Hearing this, more than a dozen people immediately came to a realization and immediately turned their heads. Everyone felt that in their eyes. They seemed to have seen a vague white figure, aloof, standing in the wind. However, Takahashi Tuku turned his head a little too late. This was because he was somewhat stunned and had to get a clear look. He wanted to see clearly what the person who had just defeated his idol looked like. It seemed that he had just seen a white figure floating in the night sky and was about to focus his gaze on the other party's face. At this moment, Sasho Kitajima's warning had arrived. Just as Takahashi Tuku was about to turn his head and retreat, he saw that the other party seemed to have noticed his peeping and shifted his gaze slightly. It was just a casual shift, but his extremely sharp gaze had already met Gao Qiao Tuku's eyes in that instant. There was no chance to dodge. Just like that, a powerful mental strength that was almost tangible shot out like a bolt of lightning from a distance of more than 50 kilometers. Suddenly, Gao Qiao Tuku felt an inexplicable trance in his mind. In that casual glance of the other party, he seemed to have seen an endless killing intent, all turning into streams of icy cold currents that surged into his mind without stopping. There was an indescribable pain, and in that instant, illusions appeared before his eyes. He seemed to have seen another world in his mind. Countless skeletons that piled up like a mountain suddenly appeared in front of him. Countless skulls were all grinning hideously at him. Many eerie white skeletons and pale, white bony arms stretched towards him. Their target was his throat, as if they wanted to strangle him to death. Takahashi Tuku could even feel that cold touch. It was like a sea of blood, churning and churning. In the sea of blood, there were countless, innumerable, and extremely cruel, hideous human faces surging out of the sea of blood. Drops of dark red blood splattered as they flew towards him with extremely sharp cries. Takahashi Tuku could no longer suppress the fear in his heart. He let out an inhuman shriek. His entire body trembled violently, and his eyes stared blankly. He no longer had the demeanor of a saint venerable, a second-grade supremacy enduring heavens, or one of the top experts of the foreign races. His body swayed, and he fell straight down from the sky. Sasho Kitajima reacted the fastest. With a wave of his hand, he had already caught Takahashi Tuku's body in his hands. He asked gravely, "What did you see? Why are you so panic-stricken?" "Blood. Blood. It's all blood. There are also endless white bones that want to kill me." Gauchiao Tuku's body trembled. His eyes were empty, and his tone was filled with fear. His hands clawed at the air in vain, as though he was still resisting something in that empty world. The dozen or so top experts of the foreign races looked at his empty eyes, which seemed to be able to connect to another world. They could not help but shiver in unison. Takahashi Tuku was not a useless person. He was one of the top experts of the foreign races, and he had the strength of a true third-grade supremacy. This was a third-grade supremacy enduring heavens. A peak second-grade supremacy enduring heavens. Such an expert was actually scared to such a state by just one look from the other party. Then, just how terrifying was this person? Chuangshang Beidao decisively slapped his palm on Gauchiao Tuku's head. Then, he channeled a stream of extremely pure mental energy into Gauchiao Tuku's head. Like a clear stream of spring water, Gauchiao Tuku's mind jolted, and he finally woke up. But all four of Takahashi Tuku's eyes darted around at the same time. He refused to look at Jun Moxie again, no matter what. It was just one look, and this supremacy enduring heavens was already scared out of his wits. What kind of power was this? This person's strength is unfathomable. I'm afraid he's already beyond the scope of what we can deal with alone. Sasho Kitajima looked worriedly at that free and easy white figure in the distance. He sighed softly, his voice filled with infinite disappointment. When he went to see his old rival, Gu Han, a few days ago, Sasho Kitajima's heart could be said to be at ease, because in his perception, there was no longer anyone in the continent who could be his match. Because his only rival back then, Gu Han's strength had regressed instead of increasing. His current cultivation level was at least 1.5 levels lower than his own. Even the strength of the number one person in Xian continent was no longer a threat. How could the Xian continent resist? The outcome of this battle was already decided. The Divine Sun race had already firmly grasped victory in their hands. On the continent side, there was still a leader from the Tian Fa forest. That peerlessly beautiful female expert was also extremely strong. She had already reached the Saint Monarch realm, but her strength was still slightly below Gu Han's. In the short term, she would not be able to contend with him. Another important discovery was that the two Saint Monarchs who had been guarding the Pillar of Heaven's mountains for a long time, Xiachan Tian and Jibo I, had actually disappeared without a trace. The so-called disappearance was not equivalent to hiding their tracks or not appearing at this place. It was a kind of intuition between experts. Xiachang Tian and Jibo I might have disappeared for some special reason. So in terms of the strength of both sides, the strange races were confident that they had the absolute upper hand. Their own side also had the absolute advantage in terms of military strength. There was no reason for them to lose this battle. In summary, Sasho Kitajima was filled with confidence for this battle. But Sasho Kitajima never expected that in just a single day, his dreams would come to nothing. A heaven-defying super expert had actually appeared on the continent's side. The appearance of this person might not be able to turn the tides of the battle, but had caused the battle to move in an unknown direction. The existence of this person had completely ruined the strange race's plans. If the Divine Sun were to forcefully attack, they would have to gather all 6 Saint Monarchs, including himself, to surround and attack this person. They would even have to be prepared to perish together with this person in order to have a chance of killing this person. But even if they were prepared to make such a sacrifice, it was still only a possibility. The final outcome was completely uncertain. Sasho Kitajima's heart was filled with a bitter taste. But he did not know that there were still some areas where his estimation was wrong. In some areas, he had overestimated Jun Moxie. But on the other hand, he had also underestimated Jun Moxie. Jun Moxie's current cultivation level was about the same as Sasho Kitajima's, or even slightly inferior. But Jun Moxie's mental strength had always been stronger than his cultivation. And with the Hongjun Pagoda, a super cheating device that could assist him at any time, anywhere, Jun Dashao's mental strength had already reached a level where he could defeat Zhang Luanhui. Most importantly, Jun Moxie had brought the murderous aura of his previous life with him. Therefore, his gaze was so sharp that it seemed as if it could pierce through the blue dome of heaven. The level of martial artists in his previous life was not as high as in this world. But don't forget that the evil monarch of his previous life was the publicly acknowledged king of assassins. How could the killing intent of a king that had been formed from standing at the peak for a long time be comparable to ordinary killing intent? A marquis might not be able to compare to a large country in terms of military strength, but his aura was comparable to a monarch of a large country. This was the lofty bearing that could be brought about by being in a high position in a small world that no one could reach. As for Jun Moxie, he had directly brought this lofty aura that looked down on all living things and stood above the common people of the world. Even if he was nothing, but with this killing intent, he was still a king. Even if he only had a 9th level Xianqi, but when this killing intent appeared, he was still the evil monarch. Chapter 1204. Therefore, in terms of martial power, Sasho Kitajima had overestimated Jun Moxie. He had been frightened by Jun Moxie's terrifyingly strong mental strength. But from another perspective, he had underestimated Jun Moxie's overall strength. Not to mention the encirclement of 6 Saint Monarchs. Even if Jun Moxie was surrounded by 6 Saint Monarchs, as long as it wasn't a sneak attack and wasn't fatal, he would still be able to escape unscathed. And to sneak an attack on Jun Moxie, this was something that was infinitely impossible. Sasho Kitajima's heart skipped a beat, and he cursed inwardly. What he had just said was the truth, but saying it at this critical juncture would undoubtedly destabilize the morale of the army. It might even cause their morale to completely collapse. Just as he was about to say a few words to motivate everyone, he suddenly felt a faint fluctuation of the opponent's aura in the distant north, as though it was greeting him. Sasho Kitajima didn't dare to be negligent. He cautiously concentrated his martial power in his eyes and circulated his martial power to completely seal his heart. He used all his strength to stabilize his divine sense before he slowly turned his head to look over. He saw a white figure floating in the night sky with his hands behind his back. He was like a proud white cloud as he slowly moved forward for a few miles. At this moment, Sasho Kitajima had a very dejected feeling. It was obvious that the opponent didn't take him seriously. Or rather, it should be said that the opponent didn't take this world seriously at all. Even if it was just a white cloud, it was still a white cloud that lingered at the peak of the 9 heavens. It couldn't be compared to the white clouds that could be seen by all living beings when they raise their heads. This clear aura, this graceful temperament, this transcendent aura, this astonishing aura, was absolutely above the common people, proud and aloof, high and mighty, incomparable. At this moment, Sasho Kitajima actually had a feeling that he could be completely subdued by the opponent at any time. His eyes were still cold, ghastly, sharp, and filled with killing intent as he looked down upon the world. However, Sasho Kitajima clearly felt that his opponent didn't want to fight him, at least not right now. Because this time, there was a trace of heartfelt contempt in the other party's eyes. This kind of gaze only contained one simple and clear meaning. You are not worthy to be my enemy. For some reason, Sasho Kitajima actually agreed with her gaze. With his current strength, perhaps he really did not have the qualifications to become enemies with the other party. The strange races were undoubtedly a very perverse race, but they were very clear about reality. Once they confirmed that the opponent was strong and could not be resisted, they would submit to the strong. This was because of the servile nature in their bones. Even the strongest of the strange races, Sasho Kitajima, was no exception. It was just that in the past, there was no one who could make him submit. But now there was. Because Jun Moxie had appeared, just as Sasho Kitajima was fully prepared and looking from afar, he saw the white-robed person smiling slightly. That smile was filled with disdain, and the corners of his mouth curled slightly. Then he raised his right hand and gave himself a thumbs up. Sasho Kitajima could not help but feel confused. According to the Xian continent, a thumbs up should be a sign of praise. Why would the other party? Just as he was thinking, he saw the other party's hand turn over, and his thumb pointed downwards, perpendicular to the ground. He even pressed it twice. The meaning was very simple. In my eyes, this is what you are. If I want to kill you, it will not be any more difficult than crushing an ant. Following that, Junimo Xie raised his head slightly and raised his chin. With a proud, disdainful, provocative, and even disdainful expression, he looked at Chuangshang Beidao from the corner of his eyes with a lofty and condescending attitude. Extreme disdain. Sasho Kitajima only felt a surge of anger in his heart. He was so angry that he almost spat out a mouthful of blood. This bastard. He specially used his spirit sense to greet me, and it was actually to humiliate me. Sasho Kitajima felt as though he was about to suffer internal injuries. Even if you are a top expert, you cannot humiliate me like this. This was a direct and undisguised humiliation. Although the other party did not say a single word from start to end, he had clearly expressed what he wanted to say and the meaning he wanted to express in such a simple and direct manner. It was not only Sasho Kitajima. The 13 top experts of the strange races were all angered to death by Jun Moxie's actions at the same time. Sasho Kitajima took in a deep breath. He used so much strength that he practically sucked in all the air in this space into his lungs, forming a vacuum in front of him. Fortunately, the surrounding strange races were all experts. Otherwise, the lack of oxygen would very likely cause him to suffocate to death. Sasho Kitajima had no choice but to pant heavily. He was afraid that he would not be able to control his temper and attack the other party. In front of such an expert, if he lost control of his mind due to anger, it would be no different from seeking death. Even if he had thousands of Saint Monarchs protecting him, the other party could still kill him the moment he lost control of his mind. Therefore, before Sasho Kitajima wanted to say or do anything, he first had to completely calm his emotions. But just as he forced himself to calm down and was about to speak, he realized that the other party had suddenly waved his hand and disappeared. Just like that, he disappeared in such a strange and abrupt manner. What is this? What kind of explanation is this? He did not even give me a chance to speak. What kind of contempt is this? Does he mean to say that I don't even have the qualifications to speak to him as an equal? No, he doesn't even need to speak as an equal. He only needs to say a sentence. I don't even have the chance to. Is this not enough? Sasho Kitajima was so angry that he could see stars. His eyes were almost popping out of their sockets, and his chest was heaving up and down violently. It was as violent as a bellow. This is too much. This was simply going too far. From a start to the end, the other party did not say a single word, but the effect was much better than speaking. Sasho Kitajima's entire body was shrouded in black mist, and his eyes were blood red. It was obvious that he was on the verge of exploding because of his excessive anger. The other 12 experts were as silent as cicadas in winter. They did not even dare to breathe loudly, and did not even dare to look at him. Under such circumstances, no matter who it was, as long as they opened their mouth, they would immediately become Sasho Kitajima's punching bag. This was a fact that was set in stone. No one was willing to use their hot face to stick to the other party's cold buttocks, and they were even more unwilling to eat a hot fart. Moreover, it was the kind of super hot fart that could kill someone. In the silent night sky, only the sound of Sasho Kitajima's hurried breathing could be heard. After a long time, he finally let out a long breath and completely calmed down. Sasho Kitajima actually laughed out loud. Although his laughter was dry, it was still a laugh. There's no other way. The other party's strength is far above mine. Even if it's an obvious humiliation, I can only do this. I can only accept it unconditionally. In fact, if our strength is higher than the other party, and we can reach the same height as that person, then the one who will be humiliated at this moment will be the other party. The strong is king, and the bigger the fist is the truth. This is the greatest truth in this world. Although he said that, but everyone could clearly hear the disappointment and frustration in Sasho Kitajima's voice. He had been the #1 expert of the strange races for thousands of years. Why had he ever been looked down upon and humiliated like this? Boss is wise and mighty. We can't wait. The 12 people said in unison. Originally, when they were bootlicking boss, there were the words unparalleled martial arts. In total, it should be boss is wise and mighty. We can't wait. But if anyone mentioned the words unparalleled martial arts now, boss would probably use his own body to conquer the world. Sasho Kitajima let out another deep sigh. Then he turned his gaze back to the battlefield below. He did not say a word for a long time. The blow that Jun Moxie gave him this time was indeed a little too heavy. Looks like these 50,000 troops are destined to be annihilated by the other party, a tall and skinny person said carefully. The so-called tall and skinny person was only in comparison. With their special body shape, no matter what, even if they were 3 meters tall, they could not be considered tall and skinny. However, compared to his companions, this foreign being could definitely be considered to be slim, or even graceful. Of course, he still could not be said to be a lady. Annihilation is also their mission as warriors of the divine sun. Dying on the battlefield is their greatest honor. Sasho Kitajima's face was still a little flushed. Guhan did not come out, so we can't use our backup plan at all. The army cannot move, so these 50,000 troops can only be used as a touchstone. What does the sacrifice of these 50,000 people count for? What I really mind is that we have almost 10 times the enemy's strength, but we have caused almost 0 losses to the enemy. Even if the enemy's cultivation is high and their battle strength is stronger, this result is too unbelievable. About 100 li behind where they were standing, the great army of the outsiders covered the sky and covered the sun. The silent camp stretched for hundreds of li, like a huge dragon in the middle of the night. That's right, the battle strength of these few troops is really too strong. The tall and skinny alien race man smacked his lips and said, especially those 300 people who charged at the very beginning. In my thousands of years of experience, this is the first time I've seen an army made up of such experts. This tall and skinny man's name was Ishikawa Dingman. Don't look at his extremely wretched appearance, as if his parents had died and his parents had remarried. However, this person's strength was extremely high, and he was one of the 6 great saint monarchs of the strange races. Although he was ranked last, he was not to be underestimated. And the best thing about him was that he did not meet Jun Moxie face to face and did not report his name. Otherwise, this evil monarch would definitely call him Stone-Piercing Phoenix Gate. Indeed, such a strong army, even I have not seen in my life. Sasho Kitajima said seriously. If I did not guess wrongly, these people must be the subordinates of that person just now. Only such a strong person is worthy of having such subordinates. Chapter 12:05. Sasho Kitajima slowly turned around and said with a heavy expression, "Your focus is still slightly off. You only saw their individual battle prowess, but did not pay attention to their close coordination with each other. The coordination of these 300 people can be said to have reached a flawless level. No matter how the formation is messed up, as long as any two of them are able to work together, they will be able to display a shocking battle prowess that is more than double the combined strength of two people. 2 people, 3 people, 4 people, all the way up to a few hundred people working together. All of them are extremely exquisite." As he said this, everyone finally noticed this point. The more they looked, the heavier their expressions became. All attacks aimed at them will be cleverly diverted by their comrades. Even fatal injuries will be reduced to light injuries by them. Once an injured person appears, that person will immediately be in the coordination of at least 6 people. Furthermore, the injured person will become the target of the other teammates' close protection. But the battle prowess of these 7 people did not weaken in the slightest. Sasho Kitajima thought for a moment and said, "Just now, 2 Frenzy Blade enduring Earths self-destructed one after another. If it was a battle between our own races, it would probably be enough to heavily injure the enduring heavens. But the other party actually gathered the strength of 6 people in an instant and neutralized the self-destruction attack. In the face of such a suicidal attack, in the end, it only caused light injuries, and it was shared among the 6 of them. Such exquisite coordination. If I did not see it with my own eyes, how could I believe it? Isn't this something inconceivable?" That's right, this matter is extremely strange. The other 12 people nodded their heads in unison. Just now, the crowd had only noticed that these 300 people had astonishing cultivation, cruel combat strength, decisive killing, and vicious attacks, but they did not pay attention to the tacit understanding and exquisite cooperation between them. But now that they had taken a closer look, everyone's expression changed. The coordination between the other party's members had reached a terrifying level of precision. The tacit understanding between each other had also reached a frightening level. Their acute sense of impending danger was even more amazing. Facing such an army, even if 2 saints charged in at the same time, if they don't use the most extreme methods at the first moment and only fight with their own strength, even if they can cause some casualties, they're destined to have no hope of coming out alive. Sasho Kijima looked carefully and said with a heavy expression, "So you have to be careful. Even if you're a Saint Monarch expert, if you encounter this army alone, it is best to turn around and flee immediately. Otherwise, you will lose your life in vain. If we lose the chance to spread far and wide, we must use the most extreme method in the shortest time possible. Otherwise, we will lose even the chance to use our final trump card." The hearts of the other 12 people shuddered. They had already imagined this troop to be very terrifying, but no one had expected this small troop of 300 people to be so terrifying. A group of profound practitioners with the cultivation of the Holy Emperor could actually kill a holy monarch by working together? If this had been said before, everyone would have thought that it was nonsense. But now, everyone had no choice but to believe it. They didn't dare to doubt it. The battle was still ongoing. Although Jun Moxie's figure had disappeared, he didn't actually go far. He had only changed to invisibility. Observing the slaughter of the Heaven Destroyer and Spirit Devourer troops from the sky, he resisted the urge to make a move several times, because he knew that the other 13 experts were also watching the battle. It was just that in the battle below, both sides had a tacit understanding to not interfere. But if he made the first move, then the other 13 would definitely rush up together. Together with the blood of Yellow Flame, he could at most hold back 3. But the remaining 10 would definitely cause great damage to the Heaven Destroyer and Spirit Devourer troops. So Jun Moxie couldn't make a move. If he didn't make a move, Sasho Kitajima, and the rest naturally wouldn't make a move either. This battle was originally a battle to test each other out. The true contest would be in the future, not now. So it could only be done by the troops below. But the thing that truly made Jun Mo Sief feel at ease was the fact that his troops had already gained the upper hand. The enemy's frenzied attacks had caused very little damage, especially since the majority of the enemy's experts were concentrated on the Heaven Destroyer and Spirit Devourer troops. This unknowingly lessened the pressure on Tiger King and his 24 troops, making it easier for them to kill. At this point, there were already 7 to 8 troops that had gathered at the central area. Then, they followed Tiger King's troops to kill the enemies in all directions. Originally, Mei Shuiyan's plan was to immediately return after breaking through. But now that the battle had reached such a stage, it had already changed from a large-scale strategy to a complete annihilation battle. If they could completely annihilate the enemy without suffering too many losses, that would naturally be the most ideal result. When Mei Shuiyan had made the arrangements, no one, including everyone else, had expected the final result of this battle to be like this. Facing an enemy 10 times their number, the final result was actually to completely annihilate the enemy, and more than half of the enemies have been taken care of by the 300 Heaven Destroyer and Spirit Devourer troops. This kind of result was truly shocking. As the battle neared its end, the sounds of explosions rang out one after another. Those were the hell-enduring ghosts and above experts of the strange races who had self-destructed in their despair, using their own bodies as the final weapon to kill the enemy. On the battlefield, the number of people still standing gradually decreased, slowly becoming sparse. But the strange race's troops still did not retreat a single step. They continued to charge forward. Even though there were only a few thousand left of the 50,000-strong army, they still continued to charge forward, wave after wave. By the time this battle ended, the sky was already starting to brighten. This battle had lasted from midnight all the way until the sky was just beginning to brighten. From afar, flags fluttered in the wind, like the sound of storm. But the million-strong army of the strange races did not move at all. They could only watch as their 50,000 comrades were slaughtered and turned into numbers calculated by the 13 heavenly ninjas standing in the sky above the battlefield. Tian Fa's side also did not make any further movements. Everyone was waiting for this battle to end. The light of dawn had finally arrived. A gust of morning wind blew across the land. Solitary Eagle and Feng Wan Yun whistled, and the Heaven Destroyer and Spirit Devourer troops gathered in the center. A blood-colored mist floated up from the battlefield within a radius of dozens of miles. It was hazy, and the stench of blood assailed the nostrils. 50,000 strange races, not a single one of them had survived. In the sky, Sasho Kitajima and the rest retreated silently. The experts who were watching this battle from the sky were not only Jun Moxie and the 13 enduring heavens from the strange races. There was another super expert. In a higher level of the night, the publicly acknowledged number 1 expert of the continent, the 9 Serenities and 14 Masters, was also hidden in the darkness. His hands are behind his back, and he was also watching this unprecedentedly intense battle. Naturally, he also saw the entire process of the battle between Jun Moxie and Sasho Kitajima. How can this be? How can there be someone with such a shocking rate of improvement? The 9 Serenities and 14 Masters sighed lightly and turned to look at the pillar of Heaven's mountains that had already been reduced to rubble. His eyes shone with a blazing light. The pillar of Heaven's mountains was not only the dividing line between the 2 continents, but also the greatest achievement of the 9 Nether tribe. One had to know that in this world, there was originally no pillar of Heaven's mountains. This highest peak in the world was an absolute barrier erected by the 9 Nether First Young Master with his peerless divine abilities back then, and he had even sealed it with an unparalleled power. This caused the tallest mountain in the continent to stand for a full 10,000 years. If not for the fact that Zhang Kuang had stolen the 9 illusory quicksand out of greed and caused the Pillar of Heaven's mountains to collapse, it could definitely be imagined that this Pillar of Heaven's mountains would continue to stand for generations to come, until the end of time. Even if this world was destroyed, as long as the 9 illusory quicksand could continue to operate, the Pillar of Heaven's mountains would still stand. With a flip of his palm, the Pillar of Heaven's mountains fell, stopping the war between the two races for a full 10,000 years. Just what kind of peerless ability was it that could create such a miracle? It was said that it was a method that could turn the clouds and rain with one turn of the hand. But even if it was truly able to turn the clouds and rain with one turn of the hand, compared to this legendary divine ability, it was definitely not worth mentioning. Even now, although the Pillar of Heaven's mountains had completely collapsed, the 9 serenities and 14 masters could still feel that a mysterious power still existed. This power was mysterious and unfathomable. It was strange and indescribable, yet it was so upright in its bones. It was warm and heavy, yet filled with killing intent. Vast and ethereal, majestic and solemn. The 9 serenities and 14 masters could not help but feel a surge of boundless respect in their hearts. The 9 nether first young master was the true pinnacle. He, and the few people before him, also called themselves the 9 nether first young master. But compared to the 9 nether first young master, were they really qualified to use this title? Were they really qualified to be mentioned in the same breath as the number 1 expert in history? Just how could they be considered to have reached the level of the 9 nether first young master? The 9 serenities and 14 masters stood alone in the night, not moving at all. His black robes fluttered in the wind, like a devil statue standing in the clouds. It was as if the rubble in front of him was filled with endless temptation, endless yearning, or perhaps the opportunity for him to break through was in this rubble. At this moment, the battle had finally ended. The battle between the Xian continent's allied forces and the strange races had finally come to an end. Feng Yuan's sword pierced through the chest of a frenzy blade enduring earth, piercing through his chest and back. The pure Xianqi from the tornado cloud sword exploded at the same time as the other party's self-destruction. Feng Yuan retreated hastily, and when the explosion ended, Feng Yuan realized that there was no longer a single enemy in front of him or behind him. Corpses were strewn all over the battlefield, and in some of the lower areas, the accumulated blood had formed a small lake, allowing the corpses to float to the surface. Even with the experiences of Solitary Eagle and Feng Yuan, this was the first time they had seen such an intense battle. The strange races fought until the very last soldier. No one took a step back, and not a single defeated soldier appeared. You're tuning in to the Warrior Lore YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.